Uncle Rich.
Keep it
Uh,
brave.
where did you grow up?
That's complicated. My father was in the Air Force, so I was born in Canada and then lived in various states and in Germany growing up.
Really interesting. Does that mean you have to do like a special citizenship thing?
No, if you're just like two of my kids were born in Japan, it's a report of birth abroad. So if you're born in as a U.S.
Oh.
citizen, it's just my birth certificate is a report of birth abroad from the United States State Department.
Was it at a base?
Yeah, it was Goose Bay, Labrador, Canada. Uh, it was a refueler for B-52s flying over the Arctic Circle in the case of a
That's really
nuclear war.
cool.
Yeah.
Is I assume because is that like a larger base or is that just a refueling
No, it
station
was
that's
in the
small?
middle of nowhere. Newfoundland is one of the poorest
Oh,
states
really?
or provinces in Canada, so I don't remember any of it. I think we
Mm.
moved when I was probably less than two.
Oh, okay. So it's just a name on a piece of paper at this point.
I've never been there.
What would be like your first memories of the place you lived?
I don't. I'm probably living with my grandmother before we flew to Germany for 5 years.
Oh, Germany for
My
five
my
years.
parents were in my my parents. Well, my dad got moved to Mississippi where my brother was born, and I lived there for some time, but I don't remember living there. But then I remember moving to Germany. And that's about my one of my first memories.
Do you do you speak any German at all?
No, just
No, too
you
bad.
know,
At the
basic
time, do you think you did?
words. No, I
Ah,
mean
too bad.
we lived mostly on a Air Force bases.
Yeah.
We lived on the economy a little bit. There was but there was no really need to do that.
Right, right. I had a friend who lived in or her entire life until she did a year a semester abroad at Monte Vista, and she lived in Frankfurt, and it was pretty cool to hear from her about what Germany was like. But
Yeah,
then
it's a
again, she
nice.
was very rich, so
I've been back there a few times when I was in the Marine Corps. I was went on business trips there. It's really nice there.
mm. How old were you when you joined the Marines?
I joined out of college.
Out of
I was
college?
commissioned in 1990 at age 22. I
Nice.
was in ROTC in college, and then I got commissioned the day before I graduated from college.
And what was an ROTC?
What was ROTC?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know any military.
Is that the question?
Yeah, I don't know
Oh,
any military names.
it's okay. It's Reserve Officer Training Corps.
Oh, okay.
So it's a college program. So in lieu of the military academies, it came about because they needed more officers, and so initially the way for getting new officers in the military was through the academies, either the Naval Academy or the military academy at West Point. And then I think it was probably World War II where they started the Reserve Officer Training Corps, where they had essentially detachments at major universities. And so they had scholarship programs for those.
Mhm.
I had a 3 year Navy scholarship, and then I switched options in my sophomore year to Marine Corps. And so
Mhm.
I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1990.
And you would say that that was a good change for you to go towards the Marines?
A good change? What do you mean?
Well, you weren't going towards the Marines, and then you decided to go towards the Marines. What would you say, like,
Oh yeah,
made
yeah. It
that
was like one of
decision?
those things where, yeah. I mean, it was not an easy thing to do. It was something that I wanted to do. So, you know, in retrospect, I'm glad that I joined the Marine Corps. I mean,
Mm,
it was formative in terms of the way that I think and do things to this day.
mm.
It was definitely, not an easy thing by any stretch
I would imagine
make
not.
that
Yeah.
to make that change. It would have been a lot easier to go in the Navy.
Seems like a lot of people believe that too, and end up in the Navy. Is there a lot of difference between the Marines and the Navy as far as training programs?
Um, Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on terms of what you mean by that. I mean, and the the basic ROTC or the academy training is about the same in
Mm.
terms of the Marines and the Navy are together because the Department of Navy has two naval services, the Navy and the Marine Corps, and so their training programs are the same, but going through ROTC between junior and senior year, I had to go what was called Officer Candidate School or Bulldog, and it's basically it essentially is a weeding out program at that point. So it's 6 weeks of really intense training and probably about a 20-25% attrition rate. And if you fail out, you can get enlisted in the Marine Corps. But then the Navy is obviously focused on its shipborne or its aviation kind of things, and it tends to be more its training tends to be more vertically aligned to the specialty a person's going to. So if you're going to be a surface warfare officer on a boat, then you get trained to do that, and that's where you go when you're commissioned. If you're submarine, then go into that direction as well. The Marine Corps sends all of its newly commissioned officers to the basic school, regardless of MOS or military operational specialty, and military occupational specialty, which is near where I live right now. I'm like literally on the outskirts of Quantico. I can hear fire on the ranges occasionally, but
Do they
6
do they
months
still let
of
you
that is.
do they let you use it at all? The range?
I don't know if there's any civilian. I don't know if there's any ranges there that are still open for. They used to have. There may be some firing ranges, that I'm able to leverage. I just haven't done it in forever. But mainly like pistol. But so 6 months of that is what essentially amounts to training you to be an infantry platoon commander, and then you get your specialty is selected about 2/3 of the way through. Some people know they're going to be in aviation, but everybody starts out together in the basic school, and it kind of creates a common ethos in terms of every Marine's a rifleman kind of thing, and so you learn all those basic skills. And then the Marine Corps also tends to be more of a kind of a jack of all trades and master of none, though you have specialties. The Navy and other services tend to keep people in their particular specialty, whereas the Marine Corps tends to keep people to be more of what they call MAGTAF officers, Marine Air Ground, kind of like to be more versatile and to kind of have a broader aspect, but kind of that can-do thing, if that makes sense.
Right. No, for sure. It seems like Marines, from what I've heard, have probably the strongest sense of brotherhood than in any of the groups. Like Marines.
Yeah, and that has to do with the fact that they can come up together. Yeah.
Right.
So it's one of those things where people join the Marine Corps. There's generally it's a decision that they're not just going into the military, but deciding they want to be a Marine, because it's definitely not the easiest of the choices to make. Which isn't to say that there aren't really challenging. It's not to say that the other aspects of the services aren't challenging. But with there's sort of like, well, you kind of distinguish yourself by becoming a Ranger or Special Forces and that sort of thing. And the Marine Corps has its Special Forces, but more than anything, people would say they're a Marine first before they're a Special Forces guy or something like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love hearing about all the military stuff, especially because I realize that because I've never had any part of like any sort of military service in anyone in my life. So it's really nice to actually hear about that. Growing up, I feel like you were the only example of that, and you were the guy that even on vacation at our place would be exercising in the living room. And I was like, wow, that is intense. I've never seen anyone, especially on vacation of all times, to take the time like that. That was really impressive.
You gotta stay in shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's weird. I was having a dream last night. For some reason, I had a dream I was waking up late and I needed to get a workout in, and I was trying to do pull-ups, and for some reason I was having trouble doing pull-ups. My arms were really tired, so I don't know if that was an indication that I was like dehydrated or something, or what was going
Your
on.
body was talking to you very specifically. You need more water.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Did we lose each other?
No, I
Something just
think I'm
went
here.
blank.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Awesome.
Oh, there we go. Never mind.
If that
I
happens, I
think I
feel
just
like we
got to
can
make
just.
sure this doesn't time out. I got to move my mouse every now and again.
Okay. If anything happens, I'll just call you back and then we'll pick up where we left off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your military service has been really interesting. And did you specialize in something?
I was a communications and information systems officer. It started out just communications officer. My dad was a commo in the Air Force.
Okay.
And so I decided I wanted to go into the comm field, and I got my first choice of specialty coming out of the Marine Corps, and I wanted to be in comm, which at the time was primarily radio and wire for supporting infantry or artillery units, and that's kind of what I did the first 4 years, and then after 4 years I went to Naval Postgraduate School and got my master's degree. That's where I met Sonia.
Impressive.
And met your parents, obviously. And then when I went, I did a payback tour here in Quantico, and then that's when they combined the MOS or my specialty with information systems officer, so it became comm and information systems officer. So through multiple experiences, my experience broadened not only to include the kind of aspects of how radio and wire, but also the entire kind of stack of how information systems support things from networks to computers to now what I do now with cloud technologies and advanced application architectures as a contractor and that sort of thing.
From what I can tell, it's probably one of the most important things jobs right now to have, is to understand technology and communication.
There's definitely money in it for sure.
It's just, it's an important job. Communication now, as far as
all jobs are important. I mean, the thing about IT is it's enabler, right? It doesn't exist for its own sake. I mean, the whole point of it is information, and
that's super important.
Zoom wouldn't be very useful if people weren't trying to connect. So the existence of the technology itself is interesting, but it's useless if people can't leverage it or don't have a need to leverage it.
Yeah. And I think the need is the same as it's always been, is it's really important to branch out and communicate. As far as the civilians go, it's never necessary. Right. Like military have very specific uses for it. But also they just want to connect with their families at home.
Sure.
Do the people that reach out to people at home while they're at base, do they use Zoom, or do they use like a special military?
Well, nowadays everybody's got it, so they can use whatever they want. I mean, Zoom or So, when I first got commissioned in 1990, I didn't even have a modem. The first computer I bought was $3,000, and it was a 386 at 20 megahertz. And it probably had a 14-inch monitor with a 40 meg hard drive. And I think I might have bought a modem separately, but back then, even though theoretically the internet existed, it wasn't until actually I was at Monterey at the Naval Postgraduate School that they offered. Yeah, well, they offered a free dial-in thing where you could connect via modem and access the internet. Really, it was kind of budding at the time. So you had an email address and built my first web page there, and that's really when the internet started taking off around the mid 90s. But after that, I mean, it used, in fact, at the time when I was dating Sonia, she was down at Biola in LA. And it used to be a good deal if you paid 10 cents a minute for long distance calls. And so we used to spend a lot of time until I got like a $300 long distance phone bill one time. And then we had to cut back a little bit because we were talking so much on the phone in a month's time frame. But now, so when, fast forward to 2005, when I moved to, when the family and I moved to Okinawa, I purposely set up Vonage, and I had, high-speed internet at the time. So I had a local phone number, and actually it was a 951 number, and I was able to make pretty much free calls to family whenever I wanted to, which is at the time really, it's only recently that now Zoom is more prevalent and that sort of thing. But, now you can kind of make calls over the internet and stuff. And it didn't used to be that until there was high speed internet to do that. But it's pretty common now, even in deployed environments for them to set up some sort of morale thing for, Marines and to connect with their families and that sort of thing.
It's probably the best thing for morale. It's just allowing, making that available just to talk with family.
Yeah. I mean, to be able to communicate with people regularly. Otherwise you could go weeks or months without talking to people. It's pretty tough.
And also not charge them $300 to do it.
Yeah.
So when you first met Aunt Sonia, you at a base. It was over at the Naval Postgraduate School.
It's a school, so but technically, I guess it's a military base. Now, if you go by there, it's all gated up because ever since 9/11, things are a lot tighter. It used to be an open campus, but it's primarily a learning institution, and but it's also a military base as well. But it's actually in the old Del Monte Hotel. It's really nice.
Yeah, I've driven by it a lot, just over there by the beach, and it's literally down the street from the beach. It's not far at all. It's like a short walk.
Yeah, I used to live on
campus from what I can see.
Ocean Avenue. We had an apartment on Ocean Avenue, so I could just walk. I could just walk to school. It was like on 6th and Ocean Avenue, and it was an apartment that we rented there, and it was really nice. I used to just, run every day along the beach. It was really nice.
I've ran that path a few times when I lived over closer to the beach. But on Ocean Avenue, by chance, did the walls of the inside of your apartment, were they paneled in wood?
No.
Okay, because we almost moved into an apartment on that street. And I was thinking
this
it would be
was called,
wild.
I think it was called Cavallero Apartments or something like that. It's still there if you go by 6th and Ocean. I mean, the walls were really thin. In fact, that wasn't really cool when I was a newlywed, but anyway. You think I'm joking.
That's probably why they put up the wood paneling at the place that I was looking at.
Maybe so. I don't know.
Oh, gosh. That was a great place. We actually, we missed a call, and like an hour later we called back, and he had given the apartment away. So that's the only reason that we didn't end up on that street. That was such a blow to us because we were so excited. We had everything confirmed. He was a nice guy. The tenant, the guy who was, what was it called? The property manager. We ended up finding a place that allowed dogs. So I think we ended up in a better position. So now we have Tracy, and she's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Meeting Aunt Sonia. From what I understand, the few stories that I've heard about that situation, she committed herself to not falling in love with the military man, and then immediately fell in love with the military man.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly her saying that I'm not sure that she, I don't remember her telling me that for sure. Maybe she had, but
it went out the window as soon as she saw you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I didn't really, though I kind of, so when I first started going to, I think the thing was called, I can't remember what it was called. It was called something First Christian or something like that at the time. They changed their name when they moved, but they used to be somewhere else in Salinas. And I went there the first Sunday, and she was leaving for college. And actually I just heard that, like, I think your parents had gotten married the day before I showed up for my first Sunday. And I saw Vicky and David there, and I thought to myself, that girl Sonia is attractive, but she was dating some other guy at the time, and then she went off to Biola, and then we kind of connected when she came back for Christmas break, and I started on the worship team, and then Janice Pearl encouraged me to ask her out, and then that kind of one thing led to another, that sort of thing.
So cute. Yeah. What did you do on the praise team?
I was a singer.
Nice. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I remember something about you being on the in the choir at school, right?
Yeah, actually. So more so in high school, I did a little bit of choir, but I also learned how to play I went to Catholic school when I was I grew up Roman Catholic, and so I went to a Catholic high school, and I actually learned how to play guitar from a Roman Catholic nun in like 1982 as a freshman.
Sounds like fun.
So I started learning how to just strum and then play, and then eventually, by the time I was a junior or senior, I was actually leading the entire school sometimes with my guitar. And so
That's beautiful.
I did a little bit like in the Catholic church I went to. I was part of what they called the folk group because that was sort of where it started, was folk
Acoustic.
music, and was part of actually kind of more of a Jesus movement across both Roman Catholic and other kinds of denominations at the time to kind of introduce, get away from the organs and that. But I did some choir, but
Mm.
primarily my musical stuff was folk group kind of stuff, and I
Mm.
did a little bit of that in college as well. But when I went to the church that your parents attended, the musicianship was way better than mine. I mean, like the Pearls were both
Janice
on it.
Pearl,
So
yeah.
Jacob played keyboard, and then David was playing drums, and then there was a guy named Hal who was just an amazing guitarist. And
Mm.
so, I still play guitar for our church, but my skills are mostly, I'm
Support
actually
now.
not a bad instrumentalist, but
Okay.
I'm not at the level of like really high end musicians and that
So
sort of thing.
you'd say that you're more comfortable with support at this moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, anymore, since I've lost my central vision, all I can do is play
Uh,
guitar. I mean, I can just see the chords and sometimes see the words, and so I try and just back up the singer because I'm probably the strongest. Well, I am the strongest guitar player. Our congregation's relatively small, so
mm,
I support what I can, that sort of thing.
that's really good. Though, I mean, playing guitar at all is impressive. I have a ukulele and I know some chords on it, but I would never say that I could play you a song. Oh. How big is your church?
We probably have about 100 people.
Nice. Yeah, that's the size of Crossroads when back in the day when I went to there. That's a good size, I'd say. That's a nice one where you can get a steady community. Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, their pastor now that they finally got is a great guy. His name is Shane, and his family. He's got like 4 kids and his wife, and they live in Salinas, and they're lovely, lovely people. I
Awesome.
was talking to him on the phone recently, and just having conversations about God and things. Um, yeah, no, for sure. My dad was, I think he was trained by Janice Pearl and them from the band that you're talking
Yeah,
about that
I
was
think
very
he
talented.
joined. He actually kind of started singing around the time that I had gone left, and so when I would come back, he would kind of be part of that. So I would visit, and yeah, he started doing that around the time that Sonia and I moved to Virginia.
Yeah, he's got a great voice. Like, really talented guy. I'm really
Hmm.
really
Yeah,
glad for him that
absolutely.
he's found a place to use that, especially. Yeah. So 5 kids. What was the plan at the
Hmm.
beginning? How many kids did you want going into the relationship, and do you still want more?
I don't know that we had a plan. I mean, we wanted to wait until Sonia finished her master's degree, so she had a plan. She when she graduated, she wanted to be in marriage and family therapy, and so we waited. And I wish we hadn't waited because by the time we started having kids, I was 34 when James was born,
Hmm.
and he's going to be turning 19 this year, but and then our last one I announced when I retired from the Marine Corps at age 43, I think. So it was, but we didn't really have a plan. I think when we first started having kids, it was definitely an easy decision to keep having kids on a pretty regular clip until Calvin was born in December of '97, and then that became sort of like, wow, this is a lot of work kind of thing, and that's we kind of almost decided we were going to quit at 4, and then when Calvin was older, like maybe 3, then it became attractive again, maybe to have another kid, and so that's how it sort of ended up.
5 is better than 4. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think in our relationship, Piper and I have talked about at least 2, probably 3.
Hmm.
So, and I think that's a good number for us. But I definitely, if we had more eventually, and if we were in a position where that was viable, then I would love as many kids as possible. You know what I mean? Like, just
Yeah,
smiling faces like that just really seems nice to me.
yeah. I mean, they're a lot of work, but they're definitely
Hmm.
worth it.
You seems like you get to really have a relationship, watch them grow up. I've heard that the best relationship you'll ever have in your entire life is with your kids. Like, just the pure love that you feel from them is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the relationship between between a husband and wife needs to be
Of course.
more intense because they're the ones you're going to be with your entire
Right.
life. But
Right.
for sure, I mean, having kids is an important thing, and they're frustrating at times, but you'll do anything for them.
Right. 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 Gosh. Um, so you grew up Roman Catholic. Did you like
Hmm.
the Catholic Church, or would you say that you're more
Yeah.
happy as a Protestant?
Well, I mean, I'm happy. I would happy is not the word. I mean, I'm a convinced Protestant.
Hmm.
When I grew up Roman Catholic, I was a convinced Roman Catholic, and it wasn't until around 1997 that I really became convinced in terms of understanding what the Reformation was all about.
Right.
So in that regard, I think it's in terms of the my convictions as a Christian are more aligned to what the Scriptures teach,
Mm.
and whereas the Roman Catholic Church is and
An
there's a
entity.
long history to that.
Yeah. And I would say that that's seems pretty accurate to me from what I remember of the Catholic Church. Um, I think that it's probably better to say that each individual has a relationship with the Bible and God rather than what the Catholic teaches, which is more centered on even pray to, what is it, some of the prophets, even Mary herself.
Well,
It's
so
nothing
what
wrong
they
with
have is
the idea,
no.
but
Well, they have a view of so there's the merits of the saints, and so it's
hmm,
very technical in terms of how their
right,
merit theology works in terms of infusion of grace and that sort of thing. But they believe they can pray to saints who have achieved more merit than they need to get into heaven, and so it's all by grace in their
right,
schema, but they can hear the prayers and help them and that sort of thing.
right. It's really interesting. I think that I mean I grew up as Protestant. I grew up as non-denominational actually. So uh,
Hmm.
all my research was after the was long. It wasn't from the church about what the Catholic Church was. It always seemed way more structured than anything I had ever experienced. Way more. This is how you do it. You pray this certain way or something along those lines. And I did like the freedom that Protestant churches gave me. Whereas it's all about the individual relationship between the churchgoer and God, or the Christian and God. I
Yeah,
like
I
that
mean
better thinking.
it depends on the expression. I wouldn't say that the scriptures teach that it's all about the individual relationship because it's a
Of
community. I
course.
mean, it's more of the the person
Hmm.
is who's a Christian is part of a group of those who are striving together, and there's a mutual encouragement towards that end,
Mm.
and so there's a commitment there as well, and
Right.
it's but in terms of the conscience, and the conscience is bound to God alone and not to
Hmm.
any human institution and that sort of thing. So even in that regard, the church should only have the authority to teach what God's word
Right.
um, makes the person, binds the conscience of the believer to.
Hmm. Yeah. Since we're dipping into this conversation, I'll probably jump straight into the big question.
Sure.
But before we get into that, these kind of topics are so complicated and so convoluted, and not in a bad way. Just they happen to be very very complicated. So it's not like I expect conversations like these to end with someone changing their mind, but at the same time, it's so important that we have them in the first place. I think it's in modern times. There's not a good outlet for people to reach out and talk with someone who directly just doesn't believe what they're saying. And that comes right down to the core of what we believe. It's good for people to talk with someone who will uh, disagree on something that they believe to their core, to the point where it's hard for me to even express what I'm trying to say. It's with love is the first thing that I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to express to someone, hey, I've struggled with this. I've come to conclusions. I'm not sure about all of them, and the realization that not only is that just in me, but in everyone that I've ever talked to, is everything that they believe they've struggled with, everything that they've come to terms with, they've had a long process to get to that point. So at this point in my life, I'm like, okay, well, what do I want to do? What I want to do is I want to have conversations with people about things that are crazy hard to understand. Because if I don't have conversations with people about things that are crazy hard to understand, then I end up in a position where I'm just spinning my wheels on my own. And that's not helpful to anyone. It doesn't help me understand things better. It doesn't help other people understand what I'm trying to say. The best thing I can do is just talk with people. So, and the only way for me to do that properly is to do it first and foremost with love. So regardless of what your opinions are or what you believe, know that I'm having these conversations with you with love and understanding and just trying to figure it all out, just like you.
Sure.
And with that, let's talk about the big question, which you already answered, but we'll start there anyway. Do you believe in God?
Of course.
Mm-hmm. And to you, what does that mean? What would God be that you believe in?
What would God be?
And take as much time as you need. It's a big question, and I don't expect a great answer.
So he's the creator of all things. I mean, he's the ground of all being, and without him, nothing could exist. And so, he's he's unique, and he's one being in three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit, and he created all things, and he's revealed himself not only in the things that are created, but in his word as well. And so, he's created mankind in his own image to worship him and to glorify him. And so, it's, trying to establish him philosophically or, within the limits of human reason isn't possible, because if he really is who he is and he's made himself known, then he's going to be greater than what human beings can comprehend. All we can do is apprehend what he's revealed of himself, either through creation or through special revelation, where he's revealed himself by disclosing things within creaturely capacity.
That's a great explanation. So I guess we'll break it down to a couple questions. And by the way, I'm never trying to lead you in any direction, even if it sounds like that.
No,
I'm just
that's
trying to figure
fine.
it out.
I mean, ask whatever questions you have.
Awesome.
I've been studying theology intensely for 25 years now. So
which is why it's really nice.
It's what I do.
And then, by the way, thank you again for being a part of this. I'm really, really excited to
Sure,
talk with
no
you,
problem.
especially because 25 years is a lot. It seems to me like you're in a sect of Christianity, and which is most people, that believe the Bible would be the perfect word of God.
Yeah, I mean, if it's revealed by God, then it's true in what it says.
It's interesting. And that's probably the first thing where it's okay. It's difficult for me to grasp onto this concept. So when you say perfect word of God, and when I say perfect word of God, but you were disagreeing, if you would say that it is the perfect word of God, what does that mean to you? What does perfection in this sense mean to you?
So God has revealed himself in history over time. As one of the authors says, he revealed himself through dreams and through other kinds of things, and primarily through written words. So over centuries, disclosed himself to different people, and then the Holy Spirit moved men so that they were carried along by the Spirit to be able to record what God had said or done in human history, and those are recorded in various books over millennia to the perfect revelation and the fulfillment of that in Christ. And then the apostles, who pretty much then revealed what Christ's ministry was, and then the work of the Spirit to establish the church, and then the close of the canon in terms of the Word of God, so that each writer writing with respect to, not where they're like automatons just writing certain things, but they were they were writing in their own language with their own. In fact, if you, so I've studied the various, I've studied biblical Greek, and so each writer even in the Hebrew has their own style, and each writer in the New Testament has a style according to the capacities of the writer, but the writings that they have are consistent with, what the Holy Spirit revealed to them. And so in that regard, because it's God's word, if God has inspired it, then it's true because God has revealed it. So perfect in the sense of the reality that God has disclosed within the limits, again, of creaturely capacity to understand him and what he requires of man, what he's revealed about the nature of man, and what he's revealed about himself and how he wants to be worshiped, and what he's provided in Christ to be reconciled to him.
And that's impressive. That's a really good explanation. I guess one of the things that I struggle with when trying to understand what it means for the Bible to be perfect would be, even if angels, or even if the Holy Spirit leads a person in a direction, is it safe to say that the middleman between the word being on the page and being in the perfection from God himself is a human?
Are you talking about in terms of the interpreter himself?
In terms of the person who put down the story or said it for the first time, like that was a human, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was recorded by human hands for sure. I mean, the tablets, if we, in terms of what was, some of the tablets were inscribed by God, but then, Christ himself is the revelation of God in human flesh. And so we have the recorded words of God in that regard. So there's no mediation. I mean, of course, Christ is a mediator between God and man, but everything that we know is mediated. There's no truth that we have that's not mediated in some way. So we have to understand something through some sort of physical medium, but that would, deny the ability to know anything. So
exactly.
Otherwise you would have to have, blinding immediate knowledge of things. And I think that's, the sects that deny that. In fact, the radical Anabaptists, and actually there's a lot of kind of radical pietism today that kind of, that looks at, human experience as being more primary than what's written down.
I think a lot of those sects tend to be very loud rather than very large. So at least there's that.
No,
I don't think the core of Christianity is about denying the sort of biblical truth or the perfect truth.
Well, I think the most popular forms of Christianity today tend to trust human experience more than they trust the revelation of God's word.
Interesting.
So, Pentecostalism and charismatic things, even when you look at what happened on the mall with some of the movements ahead of time where people were saying God had told them certain things and Trump was going to win the election and things like that. It's very common today to have people trust what they think they're getting from some sort of immediate knowledge, that rather than trusting, and learning from God's word and what it says there in terms of a more sure and perfect revelation.
Yeah, I was talking with my cousin on the podcast, actually, and she was telling me about how she was, it was actually the day before the inauguration of Joe Biden, and she was telling me that she believed that there was going to be an uprising and that Trump was going to have another 4 years in office because a specific prophet that she was following had expressed that was going to happen. And
so I would love popular.
Exactly. And I love that people are so fired up about these sort of things, because it's good to be interested in politics and things. But one of the most alarming things is what that prophet was saying was that not only was there going to be a revolution, but that revolution was going to lead to Donald Trump having just 4 more years in office. So I think it's kind of ridiculous to say that America would survive the revelation in the first place, at least. It wasn't going to take a couple months and then all of a sudden it'd settle down. It would take at least a couple years to survive that. And if Donald Trump won, I don't know why he would only settle for 4 years if he just took over the whole country. You know what I'm saying? So,
Right.
so I think that, to me, from the get go, trusting in prophets and sort of trusting in prophets who are saying a specific message seems to be kind of wrong from the get go. But it is true that you're right that a lot of Christians end up believing this sort of thing just because someone who says they have special knowledge of what God wants told them this is the way it's supposed to be.
Right. And what I'm saying is, in Christian history, that radical pietism is very common today. It's more of in fact, the Amish and the Mennonites are actually more inheritors from the radical pietism of the Reformation. And then, but it's kind of had a resurgence in the last 120 years with the Pentecostal / charismatic movement. And that's permeated a lot of evangelicalism, whereas it wasn't really, there's always been sort of pietistic movements where people, and a lot of that is actually kind of like a form of idealism or utopianism. So anyway.
I wish utopia was possible, but regardless of the reasons you think that it's not possible, what seems to be true is that it's not going to happen. Utopia, perfect society. No matter, we've had it easier than anyone in history in modern times, and there's this hard sense of people just being ungrateful for where we've come from. When you think of what happened in World War II and what happened in the Cold War and those kind of people that were born into that society, and you think of how people are today, and you see people so passionately upset about what's happening, as if what's happening was as bad as what happened back then. And it's something that I've never really understood about how modern society can be so blind to call any sort of anything that even looks even remotely similar to what was going on back then, to call them Nazis and just move on with themselves. I don't think it's a problem to say punch Nazis, but I think it's a problem to say that someone who stands for America and American values is a Nazi in some way.
Well, if you want to understand it, there's a good book called The Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman, which shows how a lot of the Western thinking has sort of come to the place it is after a period of a few centuries. So it's explainable. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, but in terms of expressive individualism and things like that, what's happening today, the triumph of the therapeutic and things like that explains how a lot of us are kind of culturally, and I'm not excluding myself in terms of how we're all part of the times in which we live and the ways in which we think. But for people to assume that the most important thing for them is to express their individuality and to be true to themselves and true to who they really are. So, that leads to a form of sort of exclusion of anybody who would, deny that expression of their individuality, so that if everybody has to express themselves as individuals, then eventually there are people that are not going to, that are going to say, hey, I don't think what you're doing is right. And that's considered an assault against who they are as a person, rather than what their behavior or their thoughts are.
I think that's a great point. I think that the problem is that when they're saying that, hey, calling me out is wrong, they're not saying that the calling me out is wrong. Well, they are. Let's be real, they are. But what they're also saying is your reasons for it tend to be not your own, and more because you're just saying what your religion thinks. And that's a lot of truth.
More
actually.
than that, I mean, that the question about even question of whether or not a person should be able to play in women's sports, for instance, is neither religious nor non-religious. But again, it's seen as it's again seen as it's not necessarily even either a religious or non-religious thing. It has to do with whether or not, in today's society, the expression of who you are as an individual is paramount. And that's why there's sort of a lot of people have noticed that the fervor is very religious, even though it's not, if you want to call it religious, it's it's kind of almost very fundamentalistic in
Yeah.
its own in its
Hmm.
expression, because because the expression of one's individuality is seen as the highest good.
Yeah.
And so you can't,
Hmm.
if you say that something's a behavior, or a desire, there's no category for separating somebody's desire or what they want to do from who they are as a person.
Yeah.
And so a person could have a legitimate thing where they're saying, I'm not assaulting who you are as a person.
Hmm.
I don't think that your behavior is correct, or that something that you want to express is is correct.
Hmm.
And even if you just disagree on, those principles, there's not a way to discuss it today in today's society, because it's
Yeah.
seen as
Hmm.
inherent to who a person
Right.
is. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. No, exactly. I think that the transgender men, or excuse me, transgender women in women's sports is the clearest example of we've gone too far. You can't just say, and it's not even just say, it's you can't do that. There's biological differences between the two, and you can't just say I've done some changes, and so that's enough for me to be a part of this sport. And it's like, I see where you're coming from, but you're coming from a very non-sportsman like attitude when looking at sports itself. You can't just ignore that there's advantages to being a man and then say, I don't accept that there's advantages to being a man, so therefore this should be allowed. And then it's like, well, everyone in sports is going, okay, well, you just essentially screwed over a bunch of women out of their rightful place as winners of their different awards and stuff, because you wanted to be this, you wanted this sense of equality to come down on America, and it doesn't work like that. I think that's the clearest example. I think the harder aspect of it is that's more of a symptom of a larger problem, though. And I think that what people are really trying to say is, no matter what, we have to allow people to make those decisions in the first place. When it comes to sports, we can say, no, here's the line, I draw it here. But in general society, we actually do have to say, you are allowed as a man to dress in women's clothing, or you're allowed to call yourself a woman if that's what you desire. And that's a freedom of speech kind of thing. America was founded on the freedom of expression. Um, and I would say that, would you agree with at least that we are founded on that, and that's an integral part of Western society?
Um, I mean, it really depends. I mean, obviously, you don't really believe that, because you don't believe that a person who desires to, to have, who desires, kids as the object of their sexual attraction, are allowed to express themselves in that regard. So everybody has a certain moral thing in which they draw the line. Like, if I desire to express myself by torturing puppies, then there's the society draws lines in
Yeah,
different places.
I
And so
think.
the question is, what tends to human flourishing and that sort of thing. So every society makes those decisions in terms of what it what it condemns and what it promotes.
Right, but and that's true, but I don't think that there's a good reason to say that homosexuality or transgenderism itself is negative in its effects. I think it causes, some on the extremes, some very interesting things to happen, but I don't think that you could point at homosexuality and say this is negative, or point at transgenderism and say this is negative, without making large assumptions about a large group.
Well, I mean, again, it depends on how you define that. I mean, so you have to have a basis for your moral judgments to begin with, right? So you're making a moral claim, and you'd have to justify
Right.
you'd have to justify that. In
So
other words,
human
if you
flourishing
can
would be
you
the
can assert
basis.
you can certain assert you can certainly assert that.
Hmm.
It doesn't make it right. I mean, it's certainly consonant with the way a lot of people believe today, but
Hmm.
a lot of people believe things and just assert things, and assume certain moral standards without necessarily having any kind of grounding for that
Yeah.
other than their opinion.
It's wild that that's true. It's
Hmm.
um I guess I'll jump right into it since we're on the topic. Is homosexuality viable? Do people feel homosexual attraction towards people of the
Of
same
course
sex as
they
them?
do. Yeah, absolutely.
Would you is that a thing that everyone struggles with, or is that a thing that only certain individuals struggle with?
I think that everybody. So it really depends. I mean, I'd have to know where you're coming from, right? Are we biological? Are we just biological things that have evolved from matter, and are we matter in motion? And in which case, to me, really, our conversation is sort of like, ultimately groundless. I don't see how there's any kind of
Well,
a
from
moral case we can make one way or the other, even if even if that sort of thing exists. But I mean, if you're asking me from the standpoint of my convictions, I believe that man has fallen, so that
right,
we all in the fall are corrupt in our nature.
right,
And so it's not merely to me, the desire for illicit things is not something that a class of people who have certain illicit desires are any fundamentally different than those who lust for other things. Now, I think certain things are unnatural, and I think that the light of nature
it's
and
a
that
good case to
nature
make.
itself bears certain things out in that
Hmm.
regard. You don't even have to be a Christian to see the effects that ravage the body beyond things like AIDS.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm
I
not
think
making
that
a moral
right.
judgment against that. I'm not
I
trying to
would
say that
hesitate to
people are
bring up.
bad.
Yeah, I would hesitate to bring up AIDS because that is a much different topic. I
No, what I'm saying is you're asking me. What I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to make a
right.
case for the nature of the thing and
Mm,
the destruction of the human body that occurs in certain activities, and
mm,
the point is that you can assess those things. But all I'm trying to say is that from that standpoint, I don't judge
of
other
course.
people who have those desires as any more surprising in terms of
Mm,
what I consider to be the state of man
mm,
apart from the redeeming work of Christ.
mm. That's yeah. To be more specific, then, to be as specific as I can, is anal sex a sin?
Yes,
In the act as well as the desire for it.
the desire itself, yes, because of the corruption again. So, I don't know how much you've actually studied in terms of Christian theology, but and how much you understand about what the scriptures say about mankind. But mankind is fallen
Mm-hmm.
in his faculties, and so any desire for
It.
sexual relationship other than for one spouse is sinful. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not just because the person is desiring something for another man, but because it's not the appropriate outlet that God has created man and woman for.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I think is really interesting that's come up is we have individuals and groups of people who grew up essentially, even if they knew about Christianity, they never grew up in the church. So they could have an entire lifetime of not necessarily really thinking much about how Christianity doesn't condone homosexuality, and they can grow up and meet someone and marry them for whatever that means to you, and live in a long, happy life together, and then at the end of their life, pass away. And this is such an interesting thing. Christians would tell that person who's passed away, who was never Christian, and the only major negative thing in their life that they ever did was have a homosexual relationship, that is enough to put them send them to hell, essentially. And I think that it's very clear that Christianity doesn't condone homosexuality, but it's not clear as to a secular, non-Christian reason that would even be. How could someone who isn't Christian come to terms with homosexuality being negative entirely, like being a negative thing? Because if that were the case and it were negative, then it would be much easier to talk to a homosexual person and say, hey, this is negative in your life because of this reason. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't seem that that's the case. It doesn't seem like there is a negative aspect to being homosexual. Do you think that
I
is that
guess
true?
I don't see how that's relevant.
What I'm saying is Christians believe that homosexuality is an inherent sin, whereas there's not really much evidence to show that that is negative. It just seems that that's kind of a thing that you believe that it's immoral, but it's not really explained as exactly why it would be immoral for a man to sleep with a man. Besides that, you don't have kids that way.
Yeah, again, I don't see how that's germane, because I'm not trying to make just an opinionated discussion on that. I mean, if again, if we're, this is all about worldview, and so, on the one hand, you're trying to assume a moral fabric, and then saying, hey, how can this be right or wrong? And then you're asking me then to account for that, as if none of that actually none of that actually exists. So, for instance, sure, if I adopt the idea that we're just evolved creatures and there's nothing inherently wrong with anything we do, I'll agree with you on that. I mean, I'll assume your worldview for the sake of conversation and say, yeah, that's true. If we're just biological bags that act in certain ways, and there's no God to which we have to. Well, then what are we?
Supercomputers.
Okay, so if we're supercomputers, then what difference does it make if one neuron, or if our neuron in our computer fires in one direction or it fires in another? I mean, yeah, it doesn't make any difference. So I agree with you.
It matters to the evolutionist.
There's no difference.
It matters to the evolutionists that someone will tell someone else, one supercomputer will tell another supercomputer, that when they die, they're going to, and this is not your words, this is just the words of a lot of people, that based on this one sin, if you're not sorry for it, you will burn in hell for eternity. It matters that one supercomputer tells that to another supercomputer, because it's either true.
One supercomputer likes Pepsi, the other one likes Mountain Dew.
Yeah, but that's not the decision by which we end up in hell or heaven.
No, I know, but you're making an aesthetic argument. I mean, like, so if we're talking about aesthetics, you have a problem with it. I don't understand how it makes any difference.
But you would say that
we're both supercomputers having a conversation right now.
I know. And it's wild, isn't it?
And so, well, I mean, that's your assertion, but
that's just the physical aspect of what I'm talking about. There's more to it than just that, but that's the core of what I'm saying.
Okay, but what I'm trying to tell you is that if we're going to assume the worldview that all we are is supercomputers, and you're aesthetically displeased by the notion that one person has another, it just doesn't seem why one would really care one way or the other, because it really doesn't make any difference.
Well, it does make a difference, because
why?
If you're correct, then these people are ending up in hell. And that's awful.
But we're not talking about if I'm correct. If I'm correct, then you would have to assume the God that I believe in for a moment, and then you would understand that it actually does make sense, and you would say, oh yeah, I can follow that. I can follow that train of thought. I can follow the idea that man is created in the image of God, and that he is able to, he is allowed to tell us essentially how we are to glorify him and what he's created us for. And so, if we maintain...
I'm sorry, I guess the assumption would be that God, that is true, absolutely, and perhaps beyond our understanding, he says these things. But the assumption is that it wasn't for no reason, that anything that God would do would be for a reason. And if he says a specific command that we struggle with, we're not struggling with it because we just can't believe it. It's more of a struggle because there's a reason that we just can't grasp beyond just the
it's not hard for me to grasp at all.
Why homosexuality?
It's not really hard for me to. It's not hard. But you're trying. What you're saying is But the thing is Jacob, you don't realize what you keep doing is you want to keep jumping back and forth between two foundations, and you can't. You've got to either choose one or the other.
And I was Christian for a very long time, and I
get it. What I'm trying to get you to. I'm trying to get you
homosexuality and Christianity. If you are going to be Christian, you must deny yourself your sexuality if you are homosexual in nature. If you are
So
Christian,
wait a second.
you can't
Hold on
live
for a
as a
second. What
homosexual.
does it mean to be homosexual in nature?
Either the desire or the physical act of intimacy with someone of the same sex.
So the desire itself, that
Would be
somebody's desire makes some, just if I can follow you for a second, what you're saying is that a person's desire is who they are.
As I wouldn't put it in simple terms as that's it, but clearly that's part of it. I mean, you've never desired a man and you've ended up with a woman. That clearly has
right. What I'm trying to say
led
is
you in a
that
certain direction.
But that's where you went, and so
Yeah,
what I'm
you're a
trying to say is
culmination of
that
your experiences and your decisions. So yes, yeah, your desire for homosexuality is part of who you are.
But that's a very modern notion.
Even
so
if it is, that's still the
homosexuality.
truth.
No, what I'm trying to say, it may or may not be the truth, because people have practiced homosexuality and other kinds of things for centuries,
Mm-hmm.
and it's only within the last 100 years or so, or not really even the 100 years, but maybe 50 years or so, where people came to the conclusion that if somebody had a sexual desire, then it actually was who they were as an individual, rather than something they decided to do as a person.
Clearly,
what I'm trying to say is, what's that?
Clearly, society has gone way too far with that kind of notion, and I get what you're saying, and I agree.
You just expressed that notion.
But I'm saying it's rooted in something. What they're saying is not wrong. It's just kind of convoluted at this point.
Okay, well, I guess I don't know where to go with the conversation, because that, what I'm trying to tell you is that, and that's part of the reason why I suggest you read The Triumph of the Modern Self, to understand how Freud and other kinds of things have made sexuality itself and the sexual act to be, fundamental to the idea that if we're not expressing ourselves sexually, then we're not expressing who we are as individuals.
Yeah.
And so all you're doing is parroting back to me the way that the world, I think you think that you've actually are thinking through these, and all you're doing is parroting back what the society thinks about these things.
I'm bad at communication. That's what this is all about. I can't rely on my own thought process to get to the correct answer. That's why I'm talking with you. I wouldn't say it's parroting, but I wouldn't say what you're doing is not parroting as well. You've told me a couple times about this lovely book that you're talking about. That's kind of similar to what you would be saying that I'm doing. Pointing at anything and saying that's true is parroting what it said.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that I also that there's historical as well as reasons to trust, that there's reasons to believe that God exists, and that he has that if he does, then he has the right to define these kinds of realities. And so it's a ground for understanding things. And in fact, when you try when you study the history of Western thought, all you're left with at the end of the 20th century is nihilism, and the idea that really no person has if we can't know everything, then we can't know anything. And so all we're left with is our assertions about things, and trying to become, trying to decide that if life is ultimately meaningless and there is no God, then it really doesn't matter what we do. It really doesn't matter, and we just have to make our own meaning. And so, if that's true, I'll totally agree with you. I mean, but I have to. We have to actually evaluate worldviews, not on assuming one and then using the Christian worldview, borrowing from the idea that there's a moral standard in order to then move the goalpost when the person tries to assume that, and then say, well, but a person's just being who they are. So you gotta at least stay within that and allow a person to be consistent within their worldview, and then evaluate it on the basis of whether or not it's coherent.
Yeah, the nihilism thing. It's from the get go. It kind of sounds okay. Well, I can see why people are struggling with that. But when you start talking about the nature of truth, then you really understand the ramifications of denying something like God, or not accepting something like God. I guess that leads us to a point of what is truth? It's something that's talked a bit about in the Bible, mostly by Jesus in his conversation with Pilate, which is what I would say is the climax of the story, and then everything else would be falling at resolution after that. What does it mean when the conviction, after the conviction has gone through, then what happens? And we already convict Jesus, just as natural. I'm getting confused. Anyway, what is truth? In your perspective, what is truth?
What is truth is what God has revealed is true, and also what is revealed either through nature or through God's word.
Okay, so when you say God, how can we confirm that the God you're talking about is more true or the truth compared to other gods or other beliefs?
Because without God, there's no sense in the world. You can't actually be rational without assuming God and understanding that he is the ground of all truth and being, and any attempt to do that leads to internal and hopeless contradictions.
So when you say God, you're not talking about a general God, you're talking about the Christian God.
No, I'm talking about a specific God who's created things.
So how can we confirm
true?
How can we confirm that the Christian God is the correct interpretation, that other gods are false, and that this one in particular is correct? How can we confirm that? Well,
it has to do. Try and give me an example of a God, and then I'll show
Allah.
you how there's there's incoherence.
The Jewish God.
The Jewish God is the Christian God.
You wouldn't say that Jews go to heaven, would you?
It depends on the Jew, right?
The Jew that is
difference does that make?
Orthodox.
What difference does that make to what the statement I made? I mean, I don't understand how that's
Christianity
coherent.
and Judaism are different.
Well, modern Judaism is not prior to 8200. Have you studied the early Judaism period?
I have not studied the early
How many
Judaism
readings have you read?
I'm not denying at all that you know very much what you're talking about.
Was Jesus a Jew?
Jesus was a Jew, but the problem is that Christianity in modern times say that the one belief that matters is that Jesus was the Son of God and lived and died for our sins.
Sure.
So any
modern
Jew that says that's not true is not going to heaven, unfortunately, as Christians.
Well, I mean, it's saying, and see, I think what you're mistaking is the idea that a person is saved by what they say. Right?
No, I'm talking about their core beliefs. Jewish people do not believe that God or Jesus was God.
Right. Yeah.
So you could say that they're worshiping the same God, but you could very easily also say that they're not worshiping the same God because they deny Jesus.
Well, yeah, because again, this has to do with whether or not you follow what the revelation is, and there's a clear thing about you can see it even in the New Testament where the Pharisees reject Christ, and you can see that the line of rabbinic Judaism after that in terms of the conflicts that Paul had with them and the other apostles, and there was even during those times Christianity was considered a sect of Judaism, and it wasn't until around the 200s that there was a sharp break with that, and rabbinic Judaism was kind of ensconced in sort of a firm rejection of that. But again, it depends on whether or not you believe God exists, right? What difference? Again, these conversations about whether or not I think a Jew would go to heaven are immaterial to my worldview. Again, it's almost like the thing that you seem to want me to agree with, it all I'm doing is assuming an arbitrary personal conviction as opposed to one that's revealed, right? So if this God exists, again, if this God exists, which he does, and he's revealed himself through time and history, and his son came on the earth, the Son of God became incarnate and emptied himself and became a servant and died for the sins of all mankind, then that makes a difference. And whether or not we say, well, what if so-and-so doesn't believe that? It really doesn't make any difference. I'm just not bothered by that, and I don't know why you would think I'd be bothered by it.
It hardly matters if it would make a difference or not, because ultimately a conversation two individuals have doesn't really make a difference between the greater truth. But it does matter is if you ask the question, what would the answer be? And because we are able to ask the question, it can be answered in some way, even if it's not answered well. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So
but the question is,
if the
like, you
question
want me
is,
to answer...
do Jewish people go to heaven? That I've asked the question, what do Christians think about that? Do you think that Jewish people, Orthodox Jews, by the way, go to heaven?
Orthodox Jews who are saved by Christ go to heaven.
So not Orthodox Jews, because the current version of Orthodoxy in the Jewish faith does not include anything about Christ.
There is no mediator between God and man except for Christ. And I can't say it more obvious than that. I mean, there's just no, and again, this gets to the issue of whether or not, see, I think what a lot of Christians have this sentimental idea that God is in this omnibenevolent, kind of creation of their mind who exists to make mankind happy. And so if the scriptures don't, if the scriptures don't reveal God as just sort of some object of philosophical speculation, where we say we get to define what is good, and then God has to relate to those sorts of things. If mankind, which the scriptures reveal, is under the wrath of God for his sin, and he deserves death and condemnation, then anything good that he gets from the Creator is good. And that's the way the scriptures reveal it. They don't reveal man in a condition where God owes them good. The scriptures reveal exactly the opposite, that the moment that mankind rebelled against God, he had the right as God to wipe them off the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. And that's fundamental to what Christians believe. That's what Christ came for. If mankind needed nothing, then Christ coming to the earth was completely pointless.
Yeah, no, and by the way, I totally love and adore everyone who's studied the Bible, because there's really interesting, great things that can be said about the world today through that lens. Unfortunately, it is true that truth is hard to correctly define, for sure. One of the reasons is that no matter what you believe about your sense of community and your sense of greater, what you need to do in the greater society, it does come down to you as an individual. At the very core, Christians believe in the personal God, where it's about your individual relationship, even if it is about the rest of the world as well. It's first and foremost you as an individual and your relationship to God.
No, it's first and foremost about God creating and then redeeming a people for himself, in which individuals happen to play a part of that. And
me as an
individual is not the thing. The individual is not the one creating the reality. God, they're living in. It's sort of like saying if I have a supporting part in a movie, then the movie's about me, and so that's kind of like the way that it's being expressed, as if truth is like my bit part in the unfolding of history, and that's just not the case.
Did you know that in Japan, Japanese blue actually looks to Westerners as green? So if you said that is blue, and they might look at you with confused expression, because their blue is much more of a turquoise aqua color. It's not really blue to us. To us, we would even call it green most of the time.
Okay.
So it does matter the information that the culture provides, because it could be different than another culture.
I've lived in Japan, right?
Yeah, I know, and that's one of the reasons why.
I've worshipped with Japanese Christians too. So that it's really not. I mean, I'm not saying
Japanese are different than everybody else. I'm just saying it was an example.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's interesting, but I don't know how that's relevant to anything.
What I'm saying is, if someone expresses to you that this is the way that truth is, and you live your life believing that, if someone expresses you to truth as something else, then immediately you start at a point of, well, they're wrong because I have truth. They're incorrect.
Right.
And so that's why I'm talking about the individual matters, because your interpretation of the Bible is different than everyone else's. And the only way to come to a conclusion about what would be a greater truth is all of you talking about what it is. But you're still not.
No,
You'll only ever
I
have
don't
your
agree with that.
interpretation of what.
I don't agree
what
with
it is.
that.
So you wouldn't
I
say that
don't.
you're.
I don't agree with that. That's not consistent with what I've seen
Is there anyone
over
else
my
who has the
53
exact
years.
same interpretation as you?
No, what I'm saying, what
So
I'm trying
it
to
is an
say is
individual
that
thing.
the idea that we arrive at truth by having conversations is just not consistent with what I've seen in
Okay.
my years. That there's a lot of there's a lot of common things that
Ultimate truth.
mankind understands, and when you go to other cultures, you see a commonality in terms of a lot of things where people don't have to have conversations to come to the same conclusions about things.
That's a really good point. But what I'm really talking about is if there is an objective truth, there is no way to confirm that it is objective truth without consulting someone else. You can believe that it's objective truth, but as soon as you talk with someone else, then it's subjective, and then it's confirmed, and then it goes back to being objective. Unless you confirm,
I don't agree with that.
Unless you confirm with someone that something is true, then you could never say that it was objective.
Well, then there's really not there if there's no such thing as objective truth that comes about by a massive subjectivity. There's not that you don't have an objective truth in that case, and all we have is each one's apprehension of the truth, and so that would be true again if there was no God.
Well, yeah, exactly. But even if there is a God, objective truth would be what God gives us, and subjective truth is what we have. We try to base our subjective truth on objective truth. That's the best we can do. But we don't actually get the exact
our
perfect
apprehension.
picture.
We would have our apprehension of truth, and then we would have to, if as I believe God's word is objective truth, then we have our apprehension of that, and then sin causes us to sometimes mess that up, obviously, but the core of what that is, I think, is pretty clear. And then also things that are revealed in nature, we come to certain things, some certain conclusions, so that we can all agree that if you walk across the street and there's a truck coming, then it's either you or the truck, you're going to lose.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about objective truth is that the only way, but like you would have to talk with someone else to confirm that.
No, you could learn that the truck.
An individual
you could learn
could
that
believe
it's either
that
the truck or you without learning. You would know that it's objectively true that it's either the truck or you without having a subjective conversation with somebody else.
Exactly, and individuals who would believe that the truck would not hurt them would be wrong. But the only way but they themselves, in a subjective sense, could believe incorrectly towards the objective truth, but could believe that they are, it is impossible for them to be harmed. That could be their truth, even if it is wrong, but their truth would suggest that.
Sure.
Yeah, so the only way for them to accept the objective truth would be to converse with someone else.
Or actually get hit by a truck and then realize that they're wrong.
Yeah, but in that case, the conversation would be the driver of the truck and them. That would definitely knock some sense into them. But before that act, they believed that they were perfectly incapable of being hurt. And as far as they were concerned, objective truth was that they are incapable of being harmed. So,
some people believe that they're. Some people believe that they're, that they're
purple.
That some people are mentally, have mental problems, schizophrenia. It really doesn't. To me, it really doesn't. It doesn't mean that that objective truth or reality doesn't exist, and just because
I believe
our mental apprehension of the world. What's that?
I would say that objective reality exists, and that would be the medium by which we communicate. And some, like you and I both have our senses in which we interpret the world, and then through those interpretations we express things to the people around us. I'm an individual. We're all individuals. The way to continue forward is with love. So, and I think that that's objective.
What's love? What's love?
The best way to treat each other. It's
right, but what is it?
What is love?
Yeah.
What is love? There's there's many songs and many stories about what that is, but I don't have the answer to that. I can answer you a little bit.
I mean, is
what I think it is
like, can
the
you break
best
it down? I mean, is
possible.
it just a
Yeah.
chemical process? Is it something our supercomputer brains do?
I think on a
Does
technical.
it have any substance to
well,
it?
okay. Well, answer me this: do you believe in atoms?
No, I'm asking you a
Yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm saying
trying
because
to
you used the
expand on
word
it.
love, and
I'm trying.
what I'm
trying
trying to
expand on
say
it.
is,
Do you believe in atoms? And I'll get to the love and it just real quick.
sure,
Do you believe in atoms?
of course.
Yeah.
I was a
Why do
nuclear
you?
engineer in my undergrad.
Right. Nice. So you know a lot about atoms. So why do you believe in atoms?
Well, because we have scientific or we have empirical evidence of their existence.
Right. Yeah. Empirical evidence.
And we can actually see them under an electron microscope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can kind of see them. You really see the reflection.
No, you can. You can actually. No, you've got measurements. You've got the way to measure them. An electron microscope has enough. They're down to
do you believe in protons
silicon
and
wafers now. Yes.
Yeah. Why would you? You can't see protons or neutrons. You can only see the electron field.
You can. No, you can see photons.
Photons?
Yes, they hit your eyes all the time. You are assuming you're not blind. You can experience photons all the time.
You're right. You can experience them, but that's a little bit different than being.
Yes, and I can measure neutrons. I measured neutrons all the time.
Right. But you rely on the evidence prior to your looking at them to know what you're looking at. You rely on scientific evidence to say, oh, I believe in neutrons because I've done all these studies and I did this test and it says this. That is something that's confirmed by scientists. Yeah,
well,
but
not just the scientists, but by physical.
You can't look at an atom. When you look at the images that even an electron microscope shows, it's more of a field or a lattice.
People didn't used to be able to see bacteria either, but
right.
then they had microscopes to be able to see them.
Right, but what I'm saying is with even the belief in atoms is just the assumption that the scientists before you have been correct in what they've studied. It's not anything grander than that. It's as simple as scientists for however many years have studied atoms and stuff and gotten to this point where they are real and you can test it. And even down to half-life of the atomic particles, of atoms themselves, that is also true. So like carbon dating can confirm how old the universe is, and unless
not carbon dating.
Well, carbon dating is one aspect, is one evidence.
Carbon dating can only go down to a few thousand years because the half-life of carbon-14 is only about 5,000 years old.
Well, I mean, because of half-life, there's half of it left.
Right,
it never actually goes away.
If it was, right, but you would have no. You can't carbon date things back billions of years.
How you said it was how many
you wouldn't
thousand
have
years?
Carbon, you wouldn't have carbon. You wouldn't have carbon molecule. You wouldn't have any carbon left at that point.
Right. What was the half-life you said for carbon? I don't remember.
It's about 5,780 years or so.
So let's say 6,000. 6,000 years. There should be half the carbon that it had at the beginning.
Approximately, yeah.
So
assuming that there's
not the full amount of carbon.
carbon-14.
Right.
Do you know how carbon-14? Do you know how carbon dating works?
Yes, more or less.
How does it work?
I am not a scientist.
There's a carbon-14 to carbon-12 ratio.
Carbon-14
pretty
meaning that
common
that's the
in the environment right now.
Neutrons it has.
Carbon-14 is an isotope of carbon. Most carbon has 12 there's usually an equal number of protons and neutrons in an atom. Mm-hmm. And so carbon-12 has 12 protons and 12 electrons in it. And then carbon-14 has 2 extra neutrons so that its atomic weight is 14, even though it's still carbon because it's 12 and 12. But there's a certain ratio at least in what you see in nature today, of a ratio between carbon-14 and carbon-12. And we know that the half-life of carbon-14 is about 5,000 years. And so assuming that we took something that was born today that had that ratio, 5,000 years from now, you would see half as many of those things per ratio in that set of carbon.
Still measurable, though. And if it had a quarter
It's
of how much it
measurable,
should
yeah.
have, then it would be something
Correct.
around 10,000 years old.
If you knew what the ratio was today compared to the ratio 5,000 years from now.
Right. And that's entirely based on scientific studies, nothing to do with philosophical studies.
It's based on empirical measurements, yes.
Right. So there's no way to accept that without accepting that the world is at least a couple 100 million years old. As long as
again, you're talking about carbon dating,
right.
so there's other ways that people use. Right, but there's other methods. What I'm trying to tell you is that if you're trying to get to the age of the Earth, they're not using carbon dating to establish that.
Well, I'm talking about the age of the Earth. I was talking about more like an age of this specific fossil or bone.
Okay.
So it's like
all right, but they're not using carbon dating in those cases. They're usually basing it on the where it appears in the fossil record, because by then, if those things are really that old, there wouldn't be the trace amounts of carbon would not be able to. You wouldn't be able to date a bone using carbon dating. Is the point?
Yeah. I mean, technically, most coal is like 300 something million years old. So, and that's entirely carbon. So, there's a certain amount of you can date coal specifically to exactly when it was formed.
You have to have a living organism in order to have carbon-14 dating.
Yes, that's what coal is. It was at one point trees or bark or whatever it was. And I'm correct in that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably true.
So even if you can't date a bone or a fossil, you can
right. But what I'm trying to say is they don't again. There's
of carbon.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, yes, we are supercomputers, and so if that's if you go back to these dating methods that we've continued to rely on, which continue to be true, then we have to be supercomputers. So the way that the supercomputers should live together.
I don't understand how that.
It's just saying we're
like some sort of leap of logic there that doesn't make it.
I'm sorry.
You're missing a lot of you're missing a lot of premises and conclusions there to go from. If you believe the carbon dating, then we have to be supercomputers.
What I'm saying is we evolved.
Can you
from something.
Draw the argument out there a little bit for me?
At the very least, you would have to say that the world is not 6,000 years old.
I mean, I don't have any knowledge of how old the Earth is. I don't know.
If you trusted science the way you would trust the atomic principles, then
why is that the case?
That it would have to be more than 6,000.
What would you have to know
Half-life.
about the? What would you? Yeah, but what would you have to know in order to determine what? If you looked at a proportion, what would you have to know in order to make that determination? What are the things that you would have to know in order to make that assertion or make that pronouncement? What would have to be true?
Continued testable evidence.
But where was? So 6,000 years ago, somebody actually said, this is how much carbon this particular thing has in it. And then we can then use that to tell you that, yes, that now we know based on that the carbon-14 back 6,000 years ago was the same ratio that it is today to carbon-12.
And this is not, and I'm not saying
Wait, no, I'm asking you a question. You know that's true, right? Because there were people making measurements 6,000 years ago.
I'm kind of confused on why you would say that anyone would be able to suggest that.
No, I get it. What I'm trying to say is that you have to make. There's certain assumptions that need to be made, and I'm like I'm relatively ambivalent about the age of the Earth per se, in terms of how exact old it is. All I'm trying to say is that confident assertions based on what we know about radioactive half-life that we have today, speed of light measurements that we have today. We have measurements of things as they are, not of things as they were, or knowing what the proportion of those things were at the time that they existed. So even the idea of like, so in a lot of cases,
but at this point, isn't that denying that any science can be confirmed at all?
No, because all science is actually measurements based on what you have. You can have theories. You can have theories about that,
but no truth.
If you make assumptions based on the fact that if we assume that the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12 was the same back then, then we could say, oh, well, there's not possible for that to be the case. But we don't know that that's the case. So you can't scientifically assert that. All you can do is know what the actual measurements are today. It's like saying, well, if I know that this weighs this much now, then I know that it weighed that much that time back then, or something like that.
But I think the problem going forward is, because you're right, there is no way to confirm that it was different. The only assumption that we actually can do is that it was the same. If there's no evidence to suggest that it's different, then you can register that. That's
not how you do science at all.
Well, science comes up to this point and it stops right where you're talking about. As long as there's no information that we don't know about yet, then this is true. It goes
again,
right up to that line, and that's where it stops. If there's information we haven't come across yet, then yes, that is true. This is true.
Science makes predictions about what it has at hand to make predictions about how it's going to act with what we know right now. Trying to go back in the past to be able to assert things, you can make you can certainly assert that that's the case, but that's not necessarily, you don't know. That's the whole point. Like, in fact, the radioactive half-life of uranium is about, I think it's about 4 billion years.
Oh, really?
And so that's in part one of the reasons why they'll say, well, the half-life of this is such and such. So the number of these atoms in the uranium we found is that. And so that's part of the way that they'll establish that, the Earth has to be as old as it is.
Right.
Less carbon and other kinds of things.
So I didn't even know about that. They use uranium.
Again, there you go. I mean, I know.
I'm not saying that. No, whoa. I'm not saying
you understand this.
Okay. That's the only way forward.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to laugh. Yeah. I'm not really laughing at you. I'm just laughing.
In no way am I suggesting that I know anything. In fact, the only thing that I do know is that everyone on some level is an idiot, including myself, especially myself, more so than everyone else, maybe. But I do know that I'm an idiot, and I do know that there's a lot of idiots out there. And I do know idiocracy is by action, not by, because we're all idiots. The biggest idiots are the ones that act like idiots. So what I'm trying to do is just trying to figure it out, and it's very confusing. But what I do know is that.
But you're not. You're asserting things, and you're saying this is the way science is. And I mean, I don't mean to be patronizing here, Jacob.
In a little bit you have been, but it's okay.
But the reason is because I have a degree in nuclear engineering and a degree and a master's degree in electrical engineering, and so when you're confidently telling me what science is.
I'm not telling you.
I'm not going to disagree with, but you are. You're telling me. You're making. When I was trying to tell you about certain things, you're saying, well, this is science. This is the way it is. If that's the way it is, then science has to assume that that's the case. And what I'm trying, at least I was trying to be patiently explain to you, no, that's not science per se. That's a philosophical assertion. That's something that needs to be established, but science itself doesn't tell you that. That's basically a theory that you could say based on what we can empirically measure now.
Right. So
and I'm certainly willing to have that discussion about whether or not there's certain things that can be established about that call into question the age of the Earth, but don't argue with me about radioactive dating, because unless you studied it, then it's going to be, it's just hard to have a conversation where you're correcting me about something I understand. I'm willing to have a conversation about the age of the Earth.
I am not making any aspirations about knowing anything. I'm saying, as I understand it, like you told me a moment ago, scientists would say that because of this element, even if it isn't carbon, because I'm an idiot, but even if this element is the reason why we believe that the Earth is as old as it is. And science ends at where the what you just said is, if there's information that we didn't know, if we went back in time somehow, it's impossible, but if we went back in time and showed that there was a specific amount of this certain atom at that time, then we can have new information for the future predictions.
Sure, absolutely.
But because we
right
can't
now
do
you
that,
could actually
truth would be what you can physically determine.
No, it's not truth. It's basically what you can.
Level, yes.
You can have a theory. You can have a theory, and then you can have some. You can have more or less confidence about whether or not the empirical evidence you have predicts things that happened in the past.
You can say just about anything that it this is the way it is unless God intervened. That is true for everything. Unless God specifically did this.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, you can come to conclusions through using scientific research. If scientists in general have done studies,
No,
and they
you
say,
wouldn't
hey,
have,
I think that
but
the
you'd
world's
have,
older
again,
than 6,000 years.
Why would God have
say,
to
well, that's
intervene?
true, unless God created the world 6,000 years ago. And then you're like, okay, well, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's possible. Certainly, it's truly possible that God created the world 6,000 years ago. But as all the evidence that we've come across so far, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily true.
All of the phenomena that we measure, and we say, what most people will do, including those who are Christians, is say there is an apparent age to the earth that looks like it's older than 6,000 years. And I'm willing to grant that.
Yeah,
I'm not disputing that. What we're arguing over is whether or not you whether or not there's scientific evidence of that. And all I'm saying is that, you could go into certain things where tree rings, and assuming that those occurred over layers were laid down through various seasons, or there are certain riverbeds that show sediment layers that show that must have happened over many thousands of years that exceed the biblical record. Sure, there's an apparent age to the earth that exceeds what the biblical account says. So if that's what the conversation is about, I'm willing to accede that there is an apparent age to the earth. But we were talking about radioactive dating, so that's where I was camping out. So
yeah, and when I started the conversation about this sort of thing, I'm trying to root it in that even if it sounds like I'm being rude, I'm genuinely an idiot, and I'm just trying to figure it out.
It's not
I'm trying to do
rude,
it with
and
love first.
I'm not saying you're an idiot either. What I'm trying to say is that you can probably get there a little clearer by saying, hey, most people believe the earth is older than 6,000 years. So what do you think? Do you think God created the earth in 7 days and all this other stuff? And are you one of those crazy people that believe what God says rather than what science says? And then I could give you a reason as to why, we can have, we should probably not always have, why we can have some confidence in what God's word says on those things.
So my main point, so we were talking about love, but I'll get into this other thing. My main point is that if you can prove one thing about the Bible that isn't literally true, then you've essentially confirmed that the Bible, as an entity itself, is interpretable. It means that each person who reads it has their own interpretation, because there's no way that if you say the world was created in 6 days and on the seventh day God rested, and then here's the specific order in which things were created, and then you look at the evidence that we have today, and there's a different story that's told there, you have to answer that question. You either have to say that science is wrong and that this is actually true and they just haven't gotten there yet, or you have to say that the Bible is a religion like any other, and it has a creation story that isn't necessarily literally true.
Hold on just a second. You've made like about 3 or 4 premises and come to 2 or 3 different conclusions and haven't established any of them. You said, first of all, that if you can prove one thing that requires an interpretation, and then what? Like, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is,
if for instance, if somebody, so let's deal with the first thing. If you're saying that, what was the first assertion that you made?
If one thing can be proven incorrect by today's evidence, then you have to figure out why that is.
Okay, what has been improved? What has been proven incorrect?
The world isn't 6,000 years old. That's just most basic. Or at the very least, plants didn't come before the sun.
Okay.
So
So what if?
Just
I mean, like,
I'm
not willing to grant that that's the case. I mean, of course,
do you think plants and earth were before
couldn't.
The sun?
What I'm trying to say is that it's possible.
And that's
Why
where I'm
couldn't
saying
it be possible?
there's no possible way to make that assertion without making the assertion that science is wrong from the get-go.
No, that's not true. What is science? I mean, you're making you know what reification is? Do you know what reification is?
Reification, you'd have to define it for me.
Reification is actually giving substance to something that's actually a concept. Science doesn't do anything, okay? Yeah. Science is just a discipline. Science doesn't have any power to do anything. Science doesn't say anything. Science is a method by which you can empirically know certain things. You actually can't know certain things. You can actually know certain things are true without science.
But
science is limited in the things that it can say. Like, for instance, it can't tell you whether pizza's good or not, whether it tastes good.
It
can describe the process. It can describe the process by which our taste buds work and things like that. But it doesn't have explanatory power for a number of things. So science doesn't tell us one thing or another about the age of the Earth.
So
it doesn't tell us. Now, what we have is we have empirical observations that men come to certain conclusions about what they assume to be the case about current physical phenomena, and barring the fact that God doesn't exist, then it's impossible that Earth exists. For that matter, of course it couldn't have, because the real question, if God didn't exist, isn't necessarily whether or not the Earth is 6,000 years, is why is there something rather than nothing?
Yeah, great question.
To me, so it is a question, but logically it doesn't. There's no answer. Science can't answer that question,
but
and it refuses to answer that question. Well, sure. Well, no, nobody can answer how something can.
Right. On a technical level, even Christianity can't say how God existed in the first place. You could just say that God did exist, and therefore now we are here. And that's fine.
Sure, but what I'm trying to say is something coming from nothing is a logical impossibility.
Yeah, and I would agree with you there, and I don't think that there's that specific question can be answered as far as humanity is concerned at the moment. But what can't be answered is how does the physical world
now, it's logically incoherent.
Yeah, but what can be answered is how does the world now behave, so we can make tests now and see facts.
Sure, we can make measurements right now. You're absolutely right.
But just saying we can extrapolate, that maybe it was
but we don't know
what
whether or not those extrapolations are accurate.
It's always true to say that maybe this isn't accurate, but you can't say to a scientist that is expressing that this is how the physical world works now, and say to them, but also it might not have done that in the past. It's but
sure
you're
you
not.
Can.
Yeah, you can. But
you can say that.
But you wouldn't if you were studying with them. It would just
absolutely,
it would just cause the project to stop.
I would have no problem with that. A scientist can't confidently assert what he knew the conditions were in the past. All he can go by is the data that he has in front of him.
Now
you can extrapolate backwards, certainly based on the fact that people have made measurements, for the last 100 years, or about the radioactive carbon dating and that sort of thing. But, you start going back much further in trying to confidently assert that with certainty that certain constants or certain proportions in things have always been the same, and you're making an assumption and not anything that you can empirically measure. If science is based on empirical measurement, you have nothing to measure. That's actually that's not science at that point. That's actually just extrapolation.
Yeah, and that's all that science is. Science is saying that given what I know, here's what I think. Given what is in front of me, here's what I think this means. And that's how we all work. Given what I know, given what I've accepted, this is how I think the world works. And that's each individual gets to say that. Given everything that I've experienced, every information that's come across to me, every interaction that I've ever had, given all of it, here's what I think about the world. And that is never the same twice. That is always the individual is making those claims.
So if the individual is making those claims, then really what the scientist said doesn't really matter to you, because he made those claims, but you're making your own observations.
So what the individual that trusts the sciences is saying is, given the nature of the world and given the information that I've been given, it seems like they were correct in all these assumptions. So I would give them more than just what I see in front of me. I don't have to confirm.
Right, but that's not consistent with what you just said. What was it you said before then that was true? Like everybody makes some sort of observation and then comes to some conclusion on their own or something like that. But
everyone does.
But then when it comes to the scientists, then some people trust them and some don't, but they don't actually make their own observations and
What I'm saying
decisions.
is someone who's a lot smarter than me has done studies on how old the Earth is and come to the conclusion that it isn't 6,000 years old. And when you look at their work, if you wanted to look at their work, that's what it would say. It would be a lot of evidence supporting what they're trying to say. And you can accept that or deny that, but the problem is that because so many scientists have accepted that and work off of that, that you can't just say, well, I don't think that that's true. They're probably all just incorrect in some way. You have to say, okay, well, they're right. They're right as far as I can tell. The nuclear bombs went off, and I believe that, even if I've never experienced a nuclear explosion. I believe that splitting an atom does that. Even I've never experienced a bomb. I've never experienced.
But again, you're talking about phenomena that exist, and then being able to actually do that, and be able to use the physical properties of matter as it exists right now, and to understand, the cross section of uranium-235, and that if you enrich that to a certain point, and you charge it with a neutron and get it excited enough and get to critical mass, you'll be able to make a nuclear bomb. You can certainly make those things, and you can actually engineer those things. And again, it doesn't tell you anything about the past. I'm sorry, but you're just not, it doesn't tell you anything at all about the past. It tells you what your phenomena are today.
If you have an amount of carbon, do you trust that in 6,000 years, half of it will be gone? Are you willing to say that? Yes,
because I know what.
Why would you trust that in 6,000 years it's going to be gone? Because I know what the radioactive decay rate is.
Why would you assume? Because I know what the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12 is right now.
What I'm saying is, if you're willing to go forward with what you have now, why aren't you willing to go backwards? You have to, if you're saying that I don't know the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in the past. So there's no reason to deny that it should be that way. If you believe that in the future,
wait, I'm sorry, you're not, your logic doesn't follow.
Okay, so
I know what it is now.
6,000 years, like you said. If you believe now, with the full amount of your soul, that in 6,000 years half of it will be gone, and then in 6,000 more years half of that will be gone, then you have to extrapolate backwards too, and say if this same amount 6,000 years ago was twice as much as I see now. If you want to say that half-life is true, then you have to confirm that that's true.
So how much carbon-14 was there 6,000 years ago?
Twice as much as there is now.
Right, and so what was the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12 back then in that particular specimen? Now. Exactly. Who knows?
But that's what I'm
point.
Saying.
Thank you.
You're willing
Thank you. You just answered my question.
You're willing to go one direction.
You don't understand that what you don't seem to understand is that it's not just the half-life of carbon-14, but the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12 that we know, and then when we measure it 6,000 years from now, we'll be able to see the proportion is different. What I'm trying to tell you is that if you don't know the proportion 6,000 years prior, then you can't say, well, because right now the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in living organisms is this right now, that it's always been that proportion. We can confidently assert that the half-life stayed the same, but we don't know what the proportion was 6,000 years ago.
Right. Are you absolutely sure that Jewish people wrote the Bible?
We have the manuscripts. What do you mean?
You can tell me with as much certainty as you'd like that the Jewish people wrote and held and told the stories of the Bible, but
sure,
by the evidence you just told me, is I could just say, yeah, well, maybe they didn't, and then I could just dismiss all of Judaism as
sure. You
not
could do
provable.
That if you want,
but then that just makes it all not provable. I can just say, oh,
no, you're mixing apples and oranges here.
How? In what way? You just told me that because I can't know the past by looking at the present. So I can't know that Jesus existed at all without having been there 2,000 years ago.
Jacob, I think you need to replay this conversation
I'm
at
not
a
saying
later
I'm
time.
good at this.
What I'm trying to say is replay this conversation until I'm going to state this, and then we can get off the carbon-14, carbon-12 dating thing, okay? Let me say this first, okay? If you don't know the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12, it doesn't matter what the half-life is. If the proportion is changed, then you can't confidently date something based on the proportion that we see today. If, for instance, there's like, say, a 5-to-1 ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 right now, carbon-14 decay rate doesn't have to change, but you can't say with certainty that 6,000 years ago, the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 was 5-to-1.
Okay.
And that's all I'm trying to say.
I absolutely am so glad that you're here to talk to me about this, because I don't know anything about it, and I wouldn't claim to know more than it. But here's what I'm struggling with. Why should I trust you specifically? I would say it's because of your
I'm not
your
asking
training.
you to trust me. You don't have to trust.
I didn't say you did, but given that you've done all these studies and studied this stuff, I should trust you, right?
No.
That why would you even have a conversation with me if you weren't even willing to say that I might say something that you didn't expect? That might have
I don't
information that you
understand
didn't
what you're
have.
saying. Why? I'm not asking you to trust me because I've studied something. That's an appeal to authority. What I'm
You
saying
told me
is
that this is true because you've studied it. How am I supposed to? You've studied it. That's why you're an authority on this topic.
I'm not. What I'm saying is you can go check that out for yourself. But
Sure.
what I'm saying is that's all I'm trying to say is that the proportion, the dating depends on the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. If you couldn't measure the proportion of carbon-14 to carbon-12, you wouldn't actually know what the age of a specimen was. Right?
And
because if you know that something, if it's like, let's say it starts at 5-to-1, right? And you have one carbon-14 for every 5 carbon-12 atoms, and it's 6,000 years. In 6,000 years, it'll be 1-to-10. But you have to know what that proportion was 6,000 years prior in order to establish what the age of that actual specimen is.
Right. If I did studies and I looked at all of the different papers and theories that all the scientists have, and I looked at them all, would the consensus be that the world is more than 6,000 years old?
I don't know.
Because that's what you're telling me to do, is to do my own research.
No, I'm not. I'm not telling you that at all. I don't know where you're getting that from.
You told me to do my own research a moment ago.
I did not. I told you how carbon-14 dating works.
Yeah, and I'm very glad that you told me that. I'm just saying that I like your opinion, and I like that you've done so much. It's
not an opinion. I'm telling you how
does everyone
carbon-14
agree
dating
with you?
Works. Absolutely. How you go
about the age of the world.
If anybody is in the carbon-14 dating, then go read about carbon-14 dating, and they'll tell you how carbon-14 dating works.
Okay, but what I'm saying is about how to prove the age of the world, the age of a specific bone. If you ask the general geologist, the general archaeologist about how old these things are, they would give you an answer, and you would trust that answer.
No.
If they said it was 2,000 years old, you would say, yeah, that's probably right.
I wouldn't trust somebody trying to make arguments about where things appear in the geological strata to say
you would dismiss all of the research they've done in their entire career of studying these things.
It's not research. It's a theory.
Yes,
do you understand how these things work?
I'm not saying they're giving me truth. I'm saying they're giving me theories of what they've understood.
Okay, that's fine.
That's all anyone does.
Right. What I'm saying is that you have a number of disciplines that are based on certain things that say, okay, in order for this particular layer exists below this layer, and this had to have occurred this age and that sort of thing. And people can make those assertions, but it has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to find oil in a certain area. Correct. There's certain theories that are totally immaterial to whether or not you can use something from those particular disciplines. The fact that somebody believes that the eye evolved from certain kinds of things makes no difference to the retinal specialist who's trying to determine, whether or not there's a treatment for my Stargardt's disease. What matters is how the eye exists today.
But the person who studies where the eye came from is an authority on where the eye came from.
I don't know.
If they say that, hey, it doesn't really matter how the eye is now, but it is interesting.
How do they know?
They don't. Nobody knows anything in that. If you're looking at it from this perspective,
not true.
If you're looking at it from this perspective, then everything is just theoretical and probably doesn't matter.
Nothing's. That's not true at all. You can build a bridge.
It doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you theories, is what you were telling me.
No, what I'm saying is that you can have what I'm saying is that there's all sorts of theories of origin based on a the fact that things have had to occur over a period of time, but have nothing to do about the usability of actual information. I can build a barn without needing to know that the supposedly the steel that's holding up my barn was formed, 6 million years ago. It's really not material to whether or not I can actually make a structure and do the math and build the structure with it.
Correct. But if someone asks the question, how old is this steel that I got to make this barn? And they answer it, they're either right or they're wrong, or you can just say it's theoretical. Either way. It is theoretical either way, but if you're considering making a barn, it's theoretical anyway, No,
it's not. It's very tangible. I'm sitting in one.
That sounds really nice. I wish I had a barn as well. It doesn't really matter that question. Can I build a barn? The question is, because it goes farther than that, is where did the atoms themselves originate? Can I even ask that question? And science has said, yeah, you can ask that question, and here's some reasons for why how it got. Here's some reasoning for how it got to where it is.
No, there's no. Actually, science doesn't have any answers to that question.
Reasoning.
It doesn't have any answers.
But it has
actually
reasoning.
most scientists consider, a lot of scientists consider, or at least people who call it. See, this is the difference between that is that again, this is the idea of scientism as a philosophy and science in terms of as a discipline. There's a lot of people that say, well, science tells you this, and it's more of a positivism. There's logical positivism that says the only knowledge you can know is the knowledge that comes by empirical investigation and things that you can prove scientifically. And so I don't buy into that philosophy. I just don't believe in it because they usually make all sorts of things. Number one, the statement that the only thing you can know by scientific investigation can't be investigated scientifically.
So the interesting thing that I see with people, and this is probably a lot because of the way my mind works, and it's very much so like sporadic, and like if you've talked to Poppy, it's really out there sometimes, and that's in me. That's my grandfather is me, and I have to accept that. Coming to conclusions is difficult sometimes, but the thing about it is, what is true is that people disagree on literally everything. There isn't a thing that that everyone will accept, and so you telling me that I'm sporadic is not changing whether or not what I'm talking about is at least based in some sort of evidence. It's not like what you're saying is the first time you've heard that idea, right?
No, what I'm trying to say is that.
So even if I get it wrong in my expression of what I'm trying to tell you, that doesn't mean that I'm strawmanning or I'm incorrect at the base. Maybe I'm just confused. Maybe that's all that it is. But what I do know is that scientists, as a general sense, because that's all I am, that's all I know, as a general sense, they say the world is this age, and I'm trusting of that. Now, I'm not saying that there is no more truth than that. I'm saying that
all right, that
at least is what scientists are saying, and I would rather accept that than someone that says, well, what if it wasn't?
No, I'm not saying what if it wasn't. What I'm trying to say is that.
Scientists
no, I'm not. I am not saying that. What I'm trying to say is that
they have access to, using everything that they have it currently available to them. This is the answer that most scientists have come to.
No, it's not. It's a little more complicated
than that. At the very least,
51%. You'd have to study the philosophy of science to understand why they're coming to those conclusions.
Science is just the process.
I get that. It is a process, but what I'm saying is that science itself does not make it relies upon a philosophical foundation.
But it does say
the
how
history
old the
of
world
science.
is.
It's based on certain philosophical assumptions. Yes.
Yeah, given what it knows, it's saying that this.
No, based on philosophical assumptions and based on certain things.
Which philosophical assumptions are they making when they say?
Well, one assumption is that one assumption is a lot of scientists will deny that you can actually, that God himself can be part of the calculation of anything that exists in the world. Like,
does that matter when you're looking at the current evidence?
Well, sure it does.
Well, God isn't going to change the rules for a specific situation.
No, what I'm saying is that if you rule out certain things, then you say that the only way that things can be here is that if it had to have occurred over, billions of years in order for things to exist as they are. That things had to explode from stars, and then you had to form into planets, and then somehow things that we don't have any mechanism to demonstrate how they actually came, that somehow life came from non-life, and the structures came to these particular things.
Yeah.
And the only way that could have occurred is over billions of years. And so all of those things matter, right? You can't, everything in that comes from certain assumptions about that, but those are basically assertions about things that we don't know because we weren't there, and then based on assumptions that the only way that these things could come together is for them to occur and for them to kind of spontaneously happen on their own without any kind of intervention or that sort of thing.
Right.
And so it rules out in certain people's minds, not all science. I mean, it's more probably, around the beginning of or the end of the 19th century that was the case. But it's certainly the prevalent view, and people tend to repeat the things that they learned.
Yeah,
but it really doesn't make any difference in terms of the actual observations, in terms of what scientists are using to build things, or what are occurring in terms of engineering. They're usually things that people debate on in terms of origins and things like that, but not in terms of the practical science that's getting funded to actually make new things or to create new engineered structures or things like that.
But that's what I'm saying, is origin itself is debatable. There's no way that we can come to a conclusion, but Christianity tells you this is how it started.
No, Christianity doesn't tell you anything.
Genesis starts with, in the beginning was the Word.
Jacob, again, this is what I'm trying to tell you is that if God is real, then He revealed it, right? Christianity didn't reveal it.
If God is real, so how do we confirm that God is real? You
know from His Word and from the Holy Spirit that He's real.
And if I don't,
and again, if you assume that He's not real, then you don't have any reason to trust your senses or your mind to begin with.
So I have to agree with you, or I'm just crazy.
No, I'm not saying you're crazy. Because I shouldn't trust
anything unless I agree that God is real.
No, what I'm trying to say is that if you are really the product of an unguided random process, then your mind could have evolved simply to there's no reason to actually trust the rationality of your mind. It could have evolved into a structure that was actually intended to, help you propagate the species, but the structure of your brain and the thoughts that you're having may be completely immaterial to whether or not you can survive as a person.
Agreed.
So there's no reason on an evolutionary basis why you should trust your reason to begin with.
Agreed. This is the thing that I think is confusing. You don't have to believe that there is a God or disbelieve that there's a God for you to come to terms. You can build a barn whether or not the steel came from 1 million years ago or less. I can come to terms with how the world should work without believing that there is a God. I can agree with Christians on every integral, specific level, and still say, well, even though they're right in all those things, that doesn't mean that there's a God, right? I don't have to trust Christianity to agree that Christians live in a good way. You don't trust
Christianity at all.
I trust Christianity.
There's no calling to trust Christianity.
You just said something very big. You told me what I believe. Is that okay?
No, I said what I told you. What I'm saying is that somebody doesn't have to trust Christianity. No, I did not. I said you don't have to trust. Nobody trusts Christianity. That Christianity is not something that one trusts.
Regardless. So this is what I'm trying to do with the communication thing here. Is I'm registering that, especially when we're talking about core values about things. People really go straight into this emotional level where we have trouble being nice to each other. And you told me that I believed a specific thing that I do not believe. I trust Christianity has gotten a lot of answers correct. There are specific answers which I am saying are wrong, but I'm not saying that Christianity is in general wrong. Christianity is about worshiping the God of goodness. And not only worshiping the God of goodness, but saying that there is nothing else. There is only the God of goodness, and you should accept that. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
What do you mean, like, He's nothing more. Do you think Christianity just trusts a God of goodness? Is that what you think Christianity believes?
For me to say a specific thing about Christianity and you to say, well, that's all you believe about Christianity? No. Christianity is wildly complicated. But one thing that it is true is that you worship the God of goodness, and not only do you worship the God of goodness, you say that there is no other God. There is only goodness. And you accept that,
Well,
or you
there's
deny
more
that,
than,
but you accept that. And is the right way
yeah,
to
I
go.
mean, there's a lot more to God than,
I know,
I mean,
I understand,
he's certainly
but that
good.
point is true, right? You worship the
Yeah,
God of
sure.
goodness.
Yeah, and by that, when I was correcting you, I wasn't trying to tell you that you didn't believe that was the case. I misunderstood you to be saying that you needed to trust Christianity, and what I was saying is that a person isn't putting their trust in Christianity per se. That, again, this is for me the difference, and I just don't think that, because this is the divorce that mankind has had with God since the Enlightenment, in terms of the post-Enlightenment philosophy, is the idea that one can actually interact with the world and that sort of thing, and assume that God is just an object of discovery for mankind. And so for me as a Christian, I just can't accept that, because if God is who he says he is, then every fact and every reality is related to him. So he's not just an object for investigation.
But even that,
and mankind,
even that, you just said, if God is real, so we have to confirm or deny whether or not he is real.
No, because again, you see what you just did there.
If we can,
if God, since, let me say this way, since God exists, mankind is not in a situation where he gets to decide whether or not God exists or not. In fact, I believe that all men know that God is true. I believe that every person, including you, know that God exists, and that it's just a suppression of unrighteousness that men decide to deny the knowledge of God. Now, that's not a conscious decision. I think it's part of all our natural tendency is to deny God and to deny him his place as creator.
Because this is what it sounds like to someone who is no longer Christian. It sounds like you're saying that if I don't agree with you, it's because I'm denying that you're right.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is what God has revealed. Let's put it this way. What I'm trying to say is that what God has revealed in his word, since I'm a Christian and I believe what God has said, it's not arrogant for me to agree with what God has said about the nature of mankind. In fact, I think it's empirically validated that mankind is sinful. It's the most empirically validated thing that mankind is sinful. And so what I'm trying to say is that mankind, by his very nature, is in rebellion against God and does not want to worship God. And so to the unbeliever, it sounds arrogant for me to say that I believe that all men know that God is and that they're created by him, because they can't not know that that's the case. They have to come up with ways in order to come up with correspond to reality. Right. But what I'm trying to say is, it sounds to somebody who says, well, I consider God to be an object of my own autonomous investigation, that therefore I'm trying to say, well, you have to agree with me or I think you're crazy. Well, that would be on the basis of me just making an appeal to authority on myself, say, unless you agree with me, then you're crazy. And that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is that mankind knows that God exists.
What I'm saying is that no matter what, all of what you believe is based on if God exists, and that is impossible to confirm.
But that he exists.
Yeah, that God exists. If God exists, you have that, which is either or. If God exists, this is the way the world is. If God doesn't exist, this is the way the world is. Period. Those are two different starting points. So what I'm saying is
mankind's not in a position to decide one way or the other if he's created by God.
But you have decided.
Well, yeah, because I'm created by God. So you just went against
what you just said, and that's what I'm trying. It may be
no,
this
I
conversation.
Wait, how did I go against him?
You said.
How did I go against what I just said?
You just said that mankind is not in a position to go one way or the other, and then you said that you have decided that God is true.
Did we do each other?
Maybe I said it wrong. But what my point is, I don't get what I'm supposed to.
Not out of my own power to do that.
Right,
for
you
sure.
Studied. and I'm proud, and I'm
No,
really
not
happy that you
studied.
did.
I didn't come to it by intellectual knowledge. I believe that
Why aren't you
God,
Catholic?
that well, again, if you hold on just a second, I believe that faith is a gift from God, and that Christ has freed mankind from the power of sin to enslave him.
Hmm.
And so that the reason that Christ had to come was because sin is so enslaving to mankind that he
Okay.
will not worship God unless God has set him free by Christ to believe in him. So it's not something that I believe that, because I'm smarter or that I'm more intelligent,
Right.
that I've come to a conclusion that it's an intellectual exercise where I say,
Beyond
well,
intelligence.
if you just study this, no, it's not beyond intelligence.
If
It's an ethical thing. It's an ethical change in terms of being set free from an ethical hostility to God.
What I'm
Man
saying
is
is
naturally at enmity with God.
no matter what your background is, the study that you have to go through is, do you believe in God? Do you believe in that's what atheists say. They say, I don't believe in God because I am not convinced that he exists.
Okay.
And that's all that they're saying. And what Christians
I
say is,
know
I
what they
am
say.
convinced that God exists. And what you even just told me is, there's no way for us to tell either way. So why would we say that yes, he exists?
No, there is a way to know one way or another.
Only if you assume that the Bible is accurate. Because without the
Not
Bible, if
just
you
assume.
erase the Bible and then erase everyone's remembrance of it, then suddenly Christianity doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Well, it's like saying, well, if you erase Hawaii, then Hawaii doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
Well, sure. If Hawaii never existed, then Hawaii would but it's
Right.
a meaningless statement.
So then the Christian version of God would be incorrect. If you what you're saying is, beyond Christianity, this is the way God is. The Christians believed we should worship in a certain way, but God goes beyond any sort of religion. And I agree with that.
No,
If
that's
that's
not
what you're
true.
saying.
It's not. That's not what I'm saying.
God
I'm
is the
saying
way
that
he is,
God,
regardless of the way we worship him. Is what you're saying. That's what you would say.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the fact that Christians are
So if you
who they
wiped
are is
Christianity
because
off
God
the
has
earth,
redeemed them.
If
What's that?
If the Christian religion died out suddenly, then God wouldn't change. It would just be God and no more Christians.
But then he wouldn't be God if Christianity died out. It wouldn't be the case.
He was around before Christianity.
No, but what I'm saying is that he would cease to be who he would. It's an impossibility if Christianity is true. No, yes, because he would not be God, because the fact that he's made a promise to his son to redeem a people for himself, that if suddenly everything that God had promised, the impossible would have to happen, that God himself would change, and that's not possible.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So your interpretation of God, about what God is integral.
Not my interpretation, but what he's revealed.
Sure, but your interpretation of what he has revealed, that is unavoidable. You interpret things the way you interpret things. The same way that I interpret things the way I interpret things. You don't think about them the way I do.
I don't agree with your view that truth is somehow my subjective apprehension of what that is.
There is no way around it.
Don't agree. No, yeah, absolutely there is, if God exists.
You can point at a color and tell me what color it is, and I can say that's not that color. You can keep trying to
Jacob, you can't evaluate me by your worldview. You can't bring me into your worldview. You're evaluating me by yours. Show me. No, I'm not. We're arguing about what I believe right now. I'm arguing about what I believe right now, and then you keep trying to bring me into your worldview where God doesn't exist.
Do you understand how I'm thinking?
Well, I absolutely do. But if you want to
you tell me I'm confused, and then you tell me that you understand. So either you're confused or you don't understand.
I didn't tell you. When did I tell you were confused?
Do you think I'm confused?
It depends on what you're talking about.
So you think I'm confused? So I don't.
No, I didn't say that. When did I say you're confused?
I didn't say you said I was confused. Well,
okay, so then why are you saying I said you're confused? What I'm trying to tell you is that you can only assess a person's coherence based on what they believe, and you can evaluate the internal consistency of their worldview based on what they believe. So you can't take a statement that I said about the internal consistency of my worldview, take me out of my worldview into your worldview, judge me on what I said, and then say, that doesn't make any sense,
Okay.
because God is just something that we make up in our head.
Okay.
And that's not what I believe.
Okay. You're absolutely right. I'll bring it to the one point, that one of the only points that there's a bunch, but I'll bring it to a specific point that I cannot accept that Christianity is true, that God is that way, and that is, and I've already talked about it with Aunt Sonia, and that's Numbers 31, chapter 17 and 18. If you're telling me that God commanded Moses to command the death of even just the baby boys, if you're telling me that, then your God is evil, and I can't accept anything else, because that is on what basis?
Upon what basis
Killing
are you making
babies
that judgment?
is wrong, no matter how you slice it. Killing an underneath 1-year-old is every time evil.
Okay.
If God took the life, then maybe you can make a very good case for me that that's acceptable. But you can't make the case to me that an individual slitting the throat of a baby is ever acceptable. And I don't want to.
Are you pro-life?
I am pro-life, yes.
Okay, good. So at least you're consistent. So
yes. There's no way to get a.
So what I'm trying to say is, let's just assume for a second that you're actually. Let's inhabit the idea that God exists for a second.
Okay.
What would you, if you had this, if you believe as I do that God is holy, and that He hates what's that?
I do not.
Okay, but you're not allowing. You're not even willing to inhabit the worldview.
No, go ahead.
If you believe that God is holy and just, and that all of mankind is dead in their sins and trespasses and under the wrath and curse of God, you can pick a lot more worse verses than that. Go try Revelation.
Sure. I don't think.
There's all sorts of things. Yeah, you like. If you're willing to stand before you can shake your fist at God all you want. I'm not. To me, the biggest problem of evil that I see in the Scripture is how can a holy God reconcile a people to Himself? That's the problem of evil that the Scriptures present. Now, that's the thing that ultimately a Christian wrestles with, and what grace exists and why Christ had to come to the earth. That God judges human sin, and that there is an execution of God's wrath against human sin, and that even in that we're born in sin, as David said, that's all throughout the Scriptures. So I actually don't. You can tell me God's evil all you want. No. Now you can stand outside the worldview all you want and say that God is evil, but that God exists, and you stand in front of Him someday and shake your fist at Him, it really doesn't move me one way or the other, honestly. It's just right. And it's not something that I wrestle with.
Mm-hmm. And you expressing to me that I'm going to one day doesn't shake that. It doesn't seem like that's the case.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
What would you say about something like Numbers 31, chapter 17 and 18, in which
I just told you what I said about it, is that God is holy and just and good.
And this is where I struggle, and I think a lot of people do with the Christian faith. On a technical level, the death of those babies was not only acceptable, but was good.
In the sense that God,
no way around it.
God has wrath against a nation, and that the nation itself is caught up in that, a nation that was actually sacrificing its own children, that He executed His wrath against that nation. And it's actually a foretaste of how God will judge all who are outside of His covenant. I'm sorry,
their babies,
Jacob. I just don't have a problem with it. If you want to, if you're asking me if I wrestle with it, I don't.
Right. Well, this is what I'm saying. This is why I can't accept Christianity on its face value. If you want to tell me specifically, and you could say the statement that the death of those babies did happen, and it was righteous that they died, and if God commanded me to kill God's enemies and slit the throat of those babies, I would also do that. If I was one of those soldiers that coming into the promised land, and Moses commanded me to slit the throat of those babies, then I would slit the throat of those babies and laugh and sing, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine," the whole time. Would you tell me that you would slit those throats of those babies?
I mean, that's just a silly statement. So What
And
I'm
that's
trying
why
to
I'm
tell
like,
you, Jacob.
how am I supposed to have a conversation with a good Christian, which I would say that you're a good Christian, if
No, you
even when I
don't. You
point out,
actually, Jacob, let's not patronize each other, okay? Let's have a little
so you're
intellectual
patronizing
respect.
me.
You actually, no, what I'm saying is you're patronizing me. You're actually ridiculing the Christian
Yes,
faith.
yes.
And then you're saying, "Hey, Rich, if I did something ridiculous like this,
Hmm.
wouldn't you see, don't you see how ridiculous your view is?" And what
How?
I'm trying to tell you, Jacob, is that no, you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to sing this little light of mine while I'm slitting these babies' throats,"
Yeah.
as if that's how that happened. And what I'm trying to tell you um, is that maybe you never wrestled with this. I don't know what you thought you were. I don't know what you
You
thought
could
you were
ask me.
trusting in when you thought you trusted in Christ. What did you actually think you were doing when you were baptized? Just out of curiosity, what did you think your baptism represented?
When I was 8,
Yeah, I
do you
mean,
think
what
I
did
had
you
a
think your
good?
Christian faith? No,
Do you
what
think
I'm
I had a
saying is
good,
like you were. So when
a
did you stop
good
being a Christian?
grasp of what
When you were.
Christianity was when I was
Did you
8?
ever? Did you ever believe that?
Do you think 8-year-olds have
Did you
good
ever
grasp of
believe you were saved
Christianity?
from your sins?
Yeah,
Did you ever believe you were saved from your sins?
yeah.
So what did that mean to you? What did you need to be saved from?
You think that at 8 years old, I had
No, I'm
a
asking you
good
as an
view,
adult.
a varied view
I'm
of what
asking
Christianity
you
was
when you were. Did you ever have a mature apprehension where you thought
at
to
8 years
yourself,
old.
no, not at 8 years old. I'm asking you, any time in your Christian faith, did you ever think to yourself, I'm grateful for Christ because he saved me from my sins?
It's like it's like you're talking to someone who's an atheist and going, "There's no way that you ever agreed with me."
No, I'm not asking. I'm asking you a question about your personal apprehension of what you thought the Christian faith was before you rejected it. What do you think? What do you think that Christ? What do you think Christians believe that Christ accomplished on the cross?
I think that Christians put emphasis on Christ, and I think that religion puts emphasis on God.
No, what I'm asking you is, what do you think Christians believe that Christ accomplished for them on the cross?
I think it's very symbolic.
No, that's not what Christians believe. I'm asking you what Christians believe that Christ accomplished for them on the cross.
Forgiveness.
From what?
Sin. What else is there that he could have done?
Sin, and then what's the consequence of that?
The only way you can say that he forgave us from anything and that's good is to say that the punishment which we were going to receive was eternally awful, and the what we
Okay.
received instead is a reward, if acceptance of this, that is eternally good.
So all Christians believe, and if you've ever seen the movie Unforgiven, at the end when he says to Clint Eastwood, he says he had it coming, and Clint Eastwood says we all got it coming, and
Yep.
that's what Christians believe, and that apart from Christ, the wrath of God is our just desert. And whatever you think about that doesn't move me one way or the other, that
I'm not
because I
trying to move
believe
you
that
one way or
I
the
believe
other.
that's true. But see, what I'm saying is that you're at the one hand, you ridicule and have disdain for the idea
That
that
idea.
God would that God would execute his wrath. Forget the children. What about the women?
Yeah.
Or again, they're just, again,
Yeah.
it's just
They had
so,
sex, so
so
they're not worthy of life.
okay. So the point is
Or the
that
virgin
you've got,
girls, which are now slaves, essentially. And you can make arguments about they're not, but they're slaves.
yeah. So you're
At one
making
point, God
you
condoned
actually,
slavery and the death of babies and
but
the murder of.
you're making all these, again, you're making aesthetic arguments because you actually don't believe that there's any actual objective
You
right or
just
wrong.
told me that I
You're
believe
making
something.
subjective values, but you can't. What is the basis of your assertion that this is wrong?
That,
What is it? You
do you believe
making that assertion?
if your baby died, if God commanded your baby to die, would you give it up willingly?
You wouldn't do it.
But he has. He has called for the death of babies. To say that
If
he
you want to
wouldn't
enter,
is just
if
it's
we're
wrong.
if we're going to have a Bible study, let's have a Bible study. But what I'm trying to tell you is that it wouldn't happen today. What I'm trying to
But
say
it has
is that,
happened.
but sure, it's happened.
Yeah. So Should God answer for the death of those babies? I would say that if
No,
you want
he's
to say,
God.
yeah,
Who's he going to answer to,
good
Jacob?
question. Good question.
But what I'm saying is that you're angry at something that doesn't exist in your mind. You're really upset about something that you think actually nobody ever commanded. So
I'm upset
I don't
that you would say
understand
that the
how
death of
upset
babies is
you are.
good. That's what I'm upset about.
I didn't say the death of babies was
Those
good.
babies.
I did not. No, I don't think that the death of anyone is good.
So,
I don't think that the death of anyone. I think that it's a really sad and terrible thing that sin kills.
it was sad and terrible that the Israelites killed those babies.
It's sad and terrible that the wages of sin is death.
It was sad and terrible that the Israelites had to kill those babies. They had to, because there was no other way to save them.
Well, in that case, it was the judgment of God against that nation.
And this is where we come to, you have to either be able to confirm or deny God for me to accept that.
Okay, so let me just summarize though from what I hear as a Christian. On the one hand, you don't believe in God, so you then remove any. Hold on. So but in that statement, you remove the basis by which you can judge whether or not that's a good thing or not.
No,
because you don't have it becomes it becomes an aesthetic. It becomes a preference. You don't like that. You can actually express your horror for that, but you can't actually ground that apprehension in anything substantive other than your supercomputer brain is repelled by it. Now, that may be good enough for you, but that doesn't affect anybody else. It's inside your head. Okay. That's all that it is, Jacob. I mean, in that regard, it has no more authority than the fact that you're just really worked up by it, but it really doesn't have any effect by that if what you believe is true.
It sounds like you're saying that it's just ridiculous that I'm worked up that God would command the death of babies. It's like, and you dismiss it as, well, God's good, so that means it must have been good. No, I'm
not dismissing it. I'm just trying to get you to evaluate why, if you believe what you believe, why you think everybody else should be worked up the same way you are. Because ultimately, these were just supercomputer things, and they really kind of existed, spontaneously out of an evolutionary process. And they were going to go to nothingness anyway, and there's going to be heat death of the universe eventually. So it really doesn't matter in the end.
You believe in the apocalypse, so what's the difference between that?
Because God exists in my universe.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm
saying is
that you can exist in a universe in which God does not exist.
Right, but the point is that in your universe, it's just all spontaneous atoms colliding in one another. Patterns. So I could break the fact that everything was just the atoms in motion, but you're just being particular about these particular atoms doing something to another set of atoms. And so one supercomputer stopped functioning, but then the carbon of that ended up growing into something else, and it did some sort of thing. And maybe it became another supercomputer, but what difference does it make?
Good point. It doesn't change the fact that that's what I believe, even if you're expressing it to me as if I'm wrong.
Well, I'm just trying to get you to. I'm just trying to say, don't judge don't think that I'm somehow that you have some sort of moral place by which you can say, oh, this is terrible. I mean, like, okay. I mean,
if I killed babies, would that be bad?
Sure it is, but in my worldview, it makes sense. In yours, I don't have an account for why that's evil.
I think the murder of babies is wrong regardless of what time period we have existed in.
Why?
Because they're a supercomputer and they're valuable.
Okay,
regardless
of
what
valuable?
They produce. Because it can produce amazing things.
Okay, what do you mean amazing? What's the value of what's the ultimate value of these amazing things? Because the universe is winding down. The sun's going to go to supernova at some point. So what difference does it make?
So why would you continue forward?
No, but again, because God exists, He'll exist forever, and those who are will be resurrected to eternal life. The earth will be renewed.
Why don't you take every risk that you possibly could? Because then you get to do amazing things, and if you die, oh well, you're in heaven. It's not like you caused it. You know, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. All
You keep
right.
trying to say that, you even keeps trying to tell me that this, what I'm saying is wrong and what you're saying is correct. And the
I'm
only
not.
way that
I'm
you can
trying to
say
get
that,
you to wrestle with your worldview, Jacob.
you
You're really
have
good at
no
telling.
idea how much I've wrestled with my worldview. You have
But you're
absolutely
but
no idea. And
you're not
it is
wrestling with it
insulting for
right
you to tell
now.
me that I'm not wrestling with it. This
Okay. Well, be
conversation is wrestling with
insulted.
it.
No,
That
you're
is what I'm
not.
trying to
You're
do. You're
you're
telling me what I
telling me.
believe.
You're telling me what's wrong, and you're not
I'm
giving
telling
me a
you with what's
basis
wrong
by
with
which to
my
evaluate.
interpretation of what you believe. That doesn't mean I'm
Okay.
right. And I
Okay.
keep I don't. And people get so upset about these things, and I'm so
I'm
confused
not
as to why,
upset at
because I'm
all.
trying to figure it out.
You're the one raising your voice.
Oh my
I'm not upset at
gosh.
all.
Uncle Rich, I love you so much. You have you have every idea of how much I love you, because you love me as much as I love you, I would assume. And I don't think that's
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think that it's sad that you've
Rich,
abandoned, something that you were born into, and you had a testimony of that. And what concerns me is that you've been given a lot of light and you've turned your back on that.
have
And
you
that
ever
because
not been
God
Christian?
exists, you'll be held accountable to that
Have you
someday.
ever not been Christian?
No.
So then, how are you even Christian to begin with? Are you sure you're not just confirming your beliefs
Well,
that you were
of
given
course,
as a child?
of course, I would take that back. I think, well, of course, I believe that Catholic is Christian, but I didn't have an apprehension of the gospel until I was much older.
Okay, but you would never at any point in your history have said that you weren't Christian. So
There's not a point in which
exactly.
No.
So are you even Christian now if you've never even given yourself to the idea that there isn't a God? I would say that it's more Christian to accept that there isn't a God and then accept that there is than
How does
any
that make any sense? How does that make sense?
Do you know what it's like to be nihilistic?
Draw out the hold on. Draw out the premise that leads inexorably to that conclusion. Like, let's just camp on that, because you're really good at making assertions like, if you deny God, you're actually a better Christian if you deny God. Like, how does that work? Like, explain it to me.
If you have,
how does that make sense?
Because that means that would be proof that you've wrestled with it to the point where you've
it doesn't mean I haven't wrestled with my beliefs, but to deny God doesn't mean that I have to wrestle with my beliefs.
To deny God would be proof that you've considered both options to their fullest extent.
No.
Regardless of what you say, yes, it does. To have denied.
No, it doesn't. Demonstrate. Like, how to, like, do you know what? Do you know what
do you know what it's like to not believe in God?
Syllogism is? You know what a syllogism is?
Tell me.
It's a conclusion that inexorably comes from true premises. Like, a bachelor is an unmarried man. Or let's say this: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. If the premises are true, again, the conclusion inexorably follows. So you actually have to make a logical argument in order to establish something. You can't just say that something's the case. Like,
something
a true Christian is somebody who's denied who God is. Like, what is the premise? Like, give me some premises that lead to that conclusion.
Do you know what it's
like to deny God? I need to know what the syllogism is. Of course I know what it is to deny God, because I've seen it. Have you ever denied God? No, but why do I have to deny God in order to be a Christian?
How can you say you've been to a place you haven't been? You haven't been there. You just don't know what it's like. That's fine. You can understand what it's like to be there, but that doesn't mean that you understand what it's like.
Hold on, let's get back to what you said. You said in order to be a true Christian, you have to deny God, right? Is that what you said?
No.
What did you say?
A stronger Christian would be one who has denied God.
How does that work? Like,
Christianity is only one acceptance, is that Jesus was God and that he died for your sins. That is the only thing that makes you a Christian. A stronger Christian would be one that wrestled with it to the point where if they didn't believe it at a certain point, they went through the process to convince themselves that it was true, and they got to the conclusion that yes, it indeed was. So that is
why would that have to? But
you don't have to wrestle with it to the same extent if you already believe that it's true. If you started from the place that it's true.
What your argument has to, in order for your argument to be true, it would have to mean that in order for that a true Christian is one who comes to that thing by just his intellectual capacity, and there's no supernatural component to it.
Stronger Christian, not just Christianity.
No, but that's not true. It's just not true.
For the acceptance of one idea.
It's just simply not true, because if a Christian is one who's born of God, then it really doesn't matter what the denial of God is essentially one who is acting according not to who he is in Christ. A person who's united to Christ doesn't have to deny Christ in order to become closer to Christ. In fact, it's by repentance and faith that one becomes a stronger Christian, not by the denial of Christ who's been resurrected and saved him from death to life. I mean, again, you're
that's not
absolutely, but
world.
You're trying to tell me about what it means to be a stronger Christian, and a stronger Christian is not one who denies God.
I'm telling you my interpretation of what a stronger Christian looks like.
Okay, well, thank you for your interpretation.
Yes, what I don't understand is why people are so reluctant to accept that because we are individuals first, and regardless of what you believe, we're individuals first, that means that we come to different interpretations. And the only way to confirm anything is to have conversations and disagree about things, and you to come away stronger and me to come away stronger at the end of the day, because we can both give and take.
See, Jacob, you have all these like little syllogisms of reality that you think are just like nuggets floating around in the universe.
I have any answers. I'm trying to figure it out.
Jacob, you just made this assertion about reality, that like a person, if they interact with people, then this is going to be the case, and that sort of thing. And it's just your thoughts. I mean, you've got all these nice ideas, but that doesn't mean that they're true.
You've even at times
you assert them with such conviction, as if everybody should just accept that. As if you're absolutely confident of that. And I haven't.
You tell me that, and I can say the same thing to you, right?
Okay, good. But what I'm saying is that you can't. What?
How is it a negative in what I believe if I could say the same thing about you? You believe things to be true. Your assumption is that God is real, and that God, the nature of God is the Christian interpretation. And more power to you. I'm glad you have Christianity is a good religion. But what I'm saying is, I'm not convinced that is perhaps the right way, especially because
right. I'm very convinced that that's what you believe.
Right.
I'm very convinced that that's what you think. What I'm trying to tell you is that you need to start evaluating the assertions that you make about things, because you state things very passionately and very emphatically, and then you say, well, I'm just trying to figure things out. But you're not. But at the one time you're stating things emphatically, then you'll back off and say you're figuring things out. But you've already established the plane by which you'll evaluate everything. So you know certain things that you're absolutely convinced of, even as you say you're not convinced of hardly anything. And so it's like you got to choose one way or the other. And I think that you don't realize how many times, maybe you need to go back and listen to the times when I challenge you, because you're really good at assertions, but not really good at backing up the things that you assert very passionately.
So one of the things that I've talked with a lot of people about is that looking back on situations, there's this interesting, well, I didn't handle that perfectly. And I think that that's pretty basic. Most of us would say that when you look at a certain circumstance, there's something I could have said that I didn't, or something that I meant and it didn't come across that way. Would you not, looking at this conversation, say the same thing about what you've said?
About which?
About something
tonight?
you've said. Yes.
Tonight? Oh, sure. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. I'm very impatient about things.
How am I supposed to take what you just said as anything? You're just telling me something that everyone at their core already believes, that I could have said it better.
No, it's not that you could have said something better. What I'm trying to say is that you have certain axioms. You have certain things by which are the ground of truth for you, but then at the same time, you say you're trying to figure them out.
Yeah.
Yes, but what I'm trying to tell you, Jacob, is that I don't at the same time say, but I'm doubtful about these things, and everything that I know is just interacting with people, and we have these conversations. What I'm
Isn't
saying
it?
is that the foundation of those things, it's not. But see, again, you have this thing like Rich only knows things because he's been told, or there's that
No.
everything that he arrives by objectively is this subjective thing and that sort of thing. And that's not what I believe the ground of my reality is. I believe the ground of my reality is a creator God who's created me in my image. And that's the reason I'm able to know anything, and I'm able to have fruition with his creation, with his word, because it's actually written and it's understandable, and his Holy Spirit can communicate through those things. And so I'm able to actually make sense of the world. And but I don't go out there and just say, Rich Lino, just interacting with the world because it's all an extension of my mind. And I will make these assertions about reality and say, well, I don't know anything except by what I subjectively apprehend. I don't know anything except what my mind asserts, and then try and make really emphatic statements that I'll hold others accountable to on the basis of that.
There's nothing that I can. There's no information that I've ever received that didn't come through my senses.
Okay.
That is truth, and I would assume that is something that you would agree with. Nothing you've ever come to didn't come to you through your senses.
I don't agree with that.
The initial time someone told you about Christianity was through your eardrums, or showed you through a book. Is that correct?
But that has nothing to do with other things that I've learned by meditating upon them or thinking about them.
Correct. But the initial interaction was through your senses.
Okay.
In what we know about senses is that you can be lied to, or at least that you can be wrong in your interpretation of what's going on. I don't know how many times I've thought I've seen a spider on my face growing up. Not very often, but like when you do, it's a notable thing. And you didn't, and it's like, okay, well, I can move on now. But that doesn't mean that because I thought I saw a spider on my face or a shadow in the corner, that doesn't mean that it was there, that there was a person or a spider there. So what I'm saying is I don't get why people don't look at that and go, okay, well, that's a good reason to try to get to the conclusions that Christianity asserts without using the Bible, without using Christianity itself. I'm trying to use
because there's more to knowledge than empirical. There's more to knowledge than what we can empirically observe.
But what we as individuals experience is always through the senses.
That we have. No, that's not true.
There is nothing you experienced that the initial time that you saw it or felt it was through a sense. Any information you have came through words that you read, or it came through sensations that you felt through your fingers. No,
there's plenty of things that you deduce inside your mind, and you come to certain things as you're thinking about them.
Yeah, you thought of them in terms of words or in terms of vision.
You don't solve a math problem by just taking it in through your senses.
Someone teaches you math. Someone can teach you math incorrectly.
Somebody teaches you a paradigm. But then actually having to solve even more complex problems that are not like it. There's intuition and all sorts of other things that come by deduction. Mm-hmm. Deduction is a function of the mind itself and not something that comes through the senses.
Everything, but initially from the starting point, even in the people who tell it to you later, they experienced it through their senses. They experienced the world.
Again,
we
that has
experience
nothing
the
to do
world
with the fact that you have knowledge that's even if you don't accept that there's a supernatural, it doesn't eliminate the fact that there's logical deduction and process of the mind that don't rely upon the senses.
What information do you have that you've received without at some point getting it through sensory information? What information do you have that didn't come through the senses?
I've solved all sorts of things that didn't come through the senses inside my mind.
Okay, but initially, to learn those things that came through the senses.
Initially, when I look at a problem,
itself. Right, the problem.
Initially, when I look at the problem, but then the knowledge that I have inside my mind from deduction itself, deduction is not a sensory thing.
But it's based on sensory input.
certain facts are, for sure, but that has nothing to do with the fact that you can learn things by deduction.
So you can take the knowledge you have and make something new out of it. That is true.
Okay, but again, this is not. But there's plenty of knowledge.
The way it was, the way you sensed it initially.
Okay, so where are you going with this? Because this is
what I'm saying is,
I'm sorry. I got to go to bed soon.
I know.
We need to wrap this up. I'm not sure where you're going with it.
Okay.
And I hate to be brief, but it's just like a pointless argument at this point. But you need to challenge your idea that everything you can know is through your senses. It's just not true. And a philosopher would be able to tell you that, who's an atheist.
It has upset me for the longest time being disregarded as wrong without at least saying you have a point. And I've only ever experienced that through religious terms, that I've been dismissed without even saying, hey, at least you've got a point. I've had a lot of religious people at least say that much, but it's only been religious people or religiously people with that sort of intensity who would say something like that. I don't.
Well, I mean, you're interacting with people who disagree with you, Jacob. I mean, what do you want them to do?
And
I mean, like, what I'm trying to say is that
you would have this conversation with me and come away with it like as if I was the one instigating this sort of attitude, this intensity.
No, I'm not telling you an attitude.
This intensity.
No, well, so here's the thing that I don't think you realize. I don't think you realize is that you actually don't like to be challenged on. Mm-hmm. To actually, like every worldview has to answer the question of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny
mm-hmm.
in order to make some sort of coherence out of that. And so what you think is intense is me trying to get you, when you ask me a question, you expect me to just kind of react on the basis of an assertion that you've made. And what I'm doing is I'm pushing back, and you find that intense, and it's actually naturally the way I talk because I'm an intense individual. But it's not out of anger, but I'm trying to get you to think through things because I've heard tons. I can't even tell you the countless hours of the kinds of arguments that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not that I dismiss them out of hand. But I want the atheist to wrestle with the assertions that they're making. I want them to wrestle and say, you know what? I need to go back and think about that assertion I'm making before I make it, on the basis of which I'm judging another person and saying, hey, that's evil. I don't care who you are. That's evil. Mm-hmm. Well, back that up. Back it up. That's all I'm trying to get you to answer, Jacob. That's all I'm trying to say. Back up the emotion that you have. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, I can't worship a God who would judge these people. Babies. There's just no way that that's the case. Well, answer that visceral reaction on the basis of your worldview and wrestle with it as to why, according to the way that you see reality, if God doesn't exist, then come up with a reason why anybody should be incensed about that. That's what I'm trying to get you to wrestle with. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but wrestle with it. Not just make the assertion that it's wrong and be really, I don't care who you are. Well, there's plenty of people that didn't have a problem killing Jews in the gas chamber on the basis of atheism and on the basis of, creating a better world order. The Communist Party was not atheistic.
Would the individual?
I mean, was not Christian, and the Nazis were not Christian either.
As a group, we accept that now, and I accept that as well. But that doesn't mean that the individual doing that action didn't believe themselves to be a Christian.
Well, but the point is, all I'm trying to say is that there's plenty of people that have come to the conclusion that some life is not worth living.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm trying to say is that there was a logical coherence to that we find abhorrent, and I'm not justifying at all. What I'm trying to say is that people, not everybody comes to the same conclusion, and being emphatic and emotional about and just making an emotional assertion about that doesn't actually ground the argument. It doesn't actually make an argument. It just adds an emotional intensity to it, and that's all I'm trying to say. Now you find it to be dismissive, and all I've been trying to do is like stop you every now and again and say, well, back that up.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to come to conclusions about this in general, at least if not for you, then for me.
Well, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm trying to say it's spiritual. It's spiritual in nature.
Yeah.
And so, what I'm trying to tell you is that if you are really concerned about these things and you feel like they're moral, I would just ask you to evaluate the Christian truth claims on the basis of the Christian truth claims themselves, not on the basis that God doesn't exist. Like, evaluate the idea that if mankind is really under the wrath and curse of God, and that God could have wiped out mankind the instant that mankind rebelled against him, and that the story of the scriptures is God calling a people for himself out of the world to himself, and then redeeming and then adding to them the Gentiles, because the Jews were the only people in the Old Testament that had that privilege. And then he expanded that to the world by Christ. Then to me, that's a wonderful thing. That's what I desire for you. That's what I want you to see. Now, I'm pushing back because in one sense we've been having this conversation because you want to explore what I believe, and you've been making certain things, and I've been asking you to challenge your assertions on that instead of just answering them in the way that you hoped I would answer them on the basis of what you know to be true in your heart, or what you've been wrestling with. But I don't look at them the same way you do. So I'm not just gonna accept your premises and then follow in the same conclusion and say, well, the real Christian is the one who denies who God is and then comes to be a stronger Christian. And the stronger Christian is the one who goes through the process of being able to deny it and come back to that. Based on what I believe God has revealed of himself, the Christian is one who's been brought from death to life. And I see in myself all the time, sinfulness and hatefulness and all sorts of things that I know proceed from the rebellion that's still part of me. But I also see in myself the work of the Spirit to keep renewing in me, and the work of Christ in that. And so I'm not trying to I don't think of myself as any better than you, Jacob. I don't think of that the reason I've come to these conclusions is because I've studied them more or that sort of thing. I mean, there's people that are way smarter than me that come to opposite conclusions. I think these things are spiritually apprehended, but they're not going to be found by a person just, shaking their fist at God and saying, I hate the very thought of who you are as a holy God judging other people, because that would be the very thing that he says, well, what do you think of your own sin, Jacob? At what point, what savior can save a person who doesn't believe that sin deserves to be punished? So that's where I come from. I mean, I can't think any other way. I'm just not capable of doing it. Now maybe there's a switch that could go off of me. I'm not denying my the fact that I could end up in a place where I completely turn my back on God. I'm not excluding from myself the impossibility of apostasy. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm in the grip of the Savior, and I know that I sin all the time and I fall short of that, but I can't just decide to turn that off for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
It'd be like denying Christ for the sake of trying to say, well, in order to be intellectually honest, I need to deny him in order to prove that he exists.
Can you understand someone who never grew up in the Christian faith without hypothetically going, okay, well, what does a person who doesn't believe in God believe?
Well, yeah, because I believe that all people are in rebellion against God.
Right. So it's this interesting concept of, without considering their background, can I understand how they think? And I don't think you can do that.
I can. I've lived in several cultures. I'm 50. I'm going to be 53 years old right now. I've got like friends across the political spectrum. I listen to things across the political spectrum. I spend hours all the time listening to these things. I know, I'm not saying in order to relate to something, you don't have to agree with. I know where people are coming from. I listen to the arguments they make. They have an internal logic of their own. I don't agree with the internal logic. I don't have to agree with it in order to understand it. I don't have to accept their premises in order to come to different expressions of what reality is like either. We can coexist in the world without agreeing upon the fact that God is in the world, and those who deny him can still navigate the world, and in some cases do a lot of really good things and live really good lives and be moral and upright in their things. But, to me, I'm walking in the world where, I know that God exists and he's real. And I know, and it's not just wishful thinking or whistling in the dark.
It's complicated. Thank you very much. And I genuinely mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's a large concept to grapple with. And whether or not you believe that I'm actually grappling with it, I can assure you that nothing matters to me more than these questions.
I hope you didn't come to the conclusion that I disbelieve. I don't believe. I believe you're grappling with it, Jacob. Okay. I'm willing to have more conversations with you. I want you to think about the way in which that if you want to talk to me, I'm happy to do it. I'm just not going to necessarily always have the conversation on the terms that you want me to have them, is all I'm trying to say. And that's part of the conversation. But if I'm pushing back, well, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I was never trying to force you into a box and saying, you have to think this way, Jacob. All I was trying to say is justify what you're saying and identify the premises. And that's the only point I was making throughout. And I think you misinterpreted that as saying, well, you have no basis for believing that. And that's not what I was trying to say. I was just trying to get you to say, establish your point. Don't just make the assertion, establish it. And so I'm happy to have more conversations, maybe based on the way that I interact. You're like, no, he's an asshole. I don't really ever want to talk to this dude again. But, I'm willing to have the conversation. But, it's just keep in mind that I have a certain way of interacting. And I think that having a healthy dialogue is you telling me that I think that, God is a moral monster, and me trying to show you that I don't think you have any basis for the.
I genuinely am so happy that you took the time to talk with me. It's a journey, isn't it? Thank you. I love you, and I know that will never change, regardless of what our opinions are on the other person's worldview.
Oh, you still there?
Oh, I'm sorry, I broke.
Huh?
Okay. All I was saying was that I love you, and I know that you love me, and that will not change to regardless of what we believe about the other person's worldview, that fact will remain the same. That we love each other.
Absolutely.
And we just want to coexist.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, you have a good evening.
Yeah. Thank you very much for a 3-hour podcast.
All right. Awesome. Take care.
Yeah. You too. Bye.
All right. Bye.